When Michael Jordan opened an old letter with handwriting he hadn't seen in 45 years, his hands started shaking. The envelope was cream-colored and simple, but the loops in the letters made his heart race. He knew exactly who wrote it, Vanessa Cole, his first love from the summer of 1978. Inside, Vanessa wrote something that changed everything. "Michael, I need to see you. There's something I should have told you in 1978. It's about that summer. Meet me at our old park next Saturday." Michael stared at those words. Vanessa had disappeared from his life when he was just 15 years old. No goodbye, no explanation. One day she was there, and the next day her entire family was gone. He'd tried to find her, asked everyone in town, but it was like she'd never existed. For 45 years, Michael wondered what happened. He became the greatest basketball player in history. He won 6 championships. He became famous around the world. But he never forgot the girl with the bright smile who believed in him before anyone else did. Now she was back, asking to meet. And she had a secret about that summer, a secret she'd carried for 45 years. But when Michael looked closer at the envelope, he found something else. A faded photograph of him and Vanessa sitting together at the park. They looked so young, so happy. And then Michael noticed something strange in the background of the photo. Someone was hiding behind a tree, watching them. Someone Michael didn't remember being there that day. Who was watching them? Why did Vanessa's family disappear so suddenly? And what secret had she been keeping for 45 years? A secret so big, it would leave the great Michael Jordan completely speechless. This isn't just a love story. This is a story about secret sacrifice and a mystery that connects Michael's entire life in ways he never imagined. Vanessa revealed when they finally met will shock you, because it means everything Michael thought he knew about his own success was wrong. Stay with us until the end to discover what Vanessa said that made Michael Jordan, a man who faced the world's toughest competitors without fear, stand frozen, unable to speak. Because the truth about that summer in 1978 will change everything you think you know about how legends are made. Michael Jordan sat in his home office in Charlotte, the afternoon sun streaming through the tall windows. At 61 years old, he still kept busy, managing his business empire, overseeing his basketball team, making appearances. But today was quiet, almost too quiet. He reached for the stack of mail his assistant had left on his desk. Most of it was the usual stuff: business documents, event invitations, fan letters from people who still remembered his playing days. He sorted through them mechanically, signing what needed signing, setting aside what needed reading. Then he saw it. A cream-colored envelope, different from the rest. No return address, just his name written in flowing handwriting that made his heart skip a beat. He knew that handwriting. He hadn't seen it in 45 years, but he knew it instantly. His hands trembled slightly as he picked up the envelope. The loops in the letters, the way the M curved just so. It was impossible, but there it was, Vanessa Cole. Michael set down the other mail and stared at the envelope. Vanessa, his first love. The girl who disappeared from his life in the summer of 1978 without warning, without explanation, without goodbye. He carefully opened the envelope, his fingers suddenly feeling clumsy. Inside was a single sheet of cream paper, folded neatly. He unfolded it and began to read. "Dear Michael, I know this letter must be a surprise. It's been 45 years since that summer in Wilmington. I've thought about writing to you 1,000 times over the years, but I never had the courage until now. I need to see you, Michael. There's something I should have told you in 1978, something I've carried with me all these years. It's about that summer, about why I left so suddenly, about what really happened. Can we meet at MP Park next Saturday at 2 p.m.? I'll understand if you don't want to come or if you don't remember me, but I hope you do. I hope you'll give me a chance to explain. It's about that summer, Michael. About us. About the truth." Vanessa Michael read the letter 3 times, each word sinking deeper into his chest. MP Park. Their place. The basketball court where he'd practiced for hours, where Vanessa would sit on the bench reading her books, waiting for him to finish so they could talk. That summer felt like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. He'd been 15, skinny, heartbroken from being cut from the varsity basketball team. Vanessa had been the bright spot in that difficult summer. The girl with the warm smile who didn't care about basketball or popularity. She just cared about him. 3 perfect months. Then she was gone. Michael leaned back in his chair, memories flooding through him. The taste of ice cream at Miller's drugstore. The sound of Vanessa's laugh when he'd tried to teach her to shoot free throws. The way she'd held his hand while they walked along the river at sunset. The night she'd told him he was good enough for anything he set his mind to, words that had fueled him through every challenge since. He'd tried to find her after she left. He'd asked everyone in town, but her family had vanished completely. No forwarding address, no phone number. In 1978, there was no internet, no social media. When someone disappeared, they just disappeared. Over the years, especially after he became famous, Michael had occasionally wondered if Vanessa would reach out. He'd imagined reunion scenarios 100 times. But as the decades passed, that hope had faded into a bittersweet memory. Now here was her letter, asking to meet after 45 years of silence. Michael looked at the envelope again and noticed something else inside. He reached in and pulled out a photograph, faded and worn at the edges. It showed 2 teenagers sitting on a bench at MP Park, him and Vanessa, smiling at the camera, young and happy and full of dreams. He remembered this photo. They'd asked a stranger to take it one afternoon in August, just days before Vanessa disappeared. But as Michael studied the picture more closely, he noticed something he'd never seen before. In the background, partially hidden behind a tree, was another figure, someone watching them, someone he didn't remember being there that day. Michael's pulse quickened. Who was that? And why did it matter now, after all these years? He picked up his phone and called his assistant. "Clear my schedule for next Saturday afternoon," he said, his voice firm. "All of it. Something important has come up." As he hung up, Michael looked at the photograph again, at the mysterious figure in the background, at Vanessa's young face smiling beside him. What really happened that summer? And why was she ready to tell him now? Michael couldn't sleep that night. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind pulled back through the decades to that summer when everything changed. He was 15 years old, and his world had just shattered. He could still remember the feeling. Standing in the gymnasium, staring at the varsity basketball team roster posted on the wall. His name wasn't there. Coach Herring had cut him from the team. Michael Jeffrey Jordan cut. Not good enough. Too short, too skinny, not ready. The humiliation burned through him like fire. He'd walked home that day feeling smaller than he'd ever felt in his life. His older brother Larry had made the team. But not Michael. Never Michael. That's when basketball stopped being fun and started being everything. He spent that entire summer on the courts, practicing until his hands bled, shooting until the sun went down, and he couldn't see the rim anymore. He was going to prove them all wrong. He was going to show everyone who doubted him. But the anger and determination only got him through the mornings. The afternoons belonged to Vanessa. Michael smiled in the darkness, remembering the day they met. It was early June, blistering hot, and he'd gone to the community pool to cool off after hours of practice. She was sitting under a tree, reading a thick book, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. He'd noticed her before at school, Vanessa Cole, the quiet girl who sat in the back of English class and drew pictures in her notebook. She was pretty in a way that seemed almost unreal, with warm brown eyes and a smile that could light up a room. But she kept to herself mostly, lost in her own world of books and art. That day at the pool, Michael's basketball had rolled away from the court and stopped right next to her tree. When he jogged over to get it, she looked up from her book. "You're really good," she said simply, nodding toward the court. Michael shrugged, still raw from being cut. Not good enough, apparently. "Good enough for what?" she asked. "For anything that matters." The bitterness in his voice surprised even him. Vanessa marked her place in her book and studied him with those thoughtful eyes. "Maybe you're measuring yourself against the wrong things." It was such an unexpected response that Michael forgot to be defensive. "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe being good at basketball isn't about making some team or impressing some coach. Maybe it's about being good for yourself, getting better every day, loving the game because you love it, not because someone else says you're worthy of playing it. Michael had stood there, basketball tucked under his arm, stunned. No one had ever talked to him like that before. Like he mattered beyond what he could do on a court. "I'm Michael," he said. "I know I'm Vanessa." She smiled that incredible smile. "Want to sit down? This book is boring anyway." That's how it started. One conversation under a tree that stretched into hours. They talked about everything. School, family, dreams, fears. Vanessa told him she wanted to be an artist, that she loved painting watercolors by the river. Michael admitted he didn't know what he wanted anymore, that basketball had been his whole identity, and now he felt lost. "You're not lost," Vanessa said as the sun began to set. "You're just at the beginning. That's different." The next day, Michael practiced his basketball in the morning, then met Vanessa at MP Park in the afternoon. It became their routine, every single day that summer. Vanessa would bring her sketchbook and sit on the bench while Michael worked on his game. Sometimes she'd draw him shooting. Sometimes she'd read poetry aloud between his practice drills. Sometimes they'd just talk, sharing the kind of deep conversations that only teenagers experiencing things for the first time can have. She taught him about art, about how to really see things instead of just looking at them. She introduced him to music beyond what was on the radio, jazz and classical pieces that told stories without words. She showed him that there was a whole world beyond basketball, and that being interested in that world didn't make him less of an athlete. It made him more of a person. Michael taught her about basketball, about the geometry of the game, the rhythm and flow of it. He showed her how to shoot free throws, his hands guiding hers, both of them laughing when the ball bounced off the rim. He explained why he loved it. The feeling of the ball in his hands, the challenge of facing a defender, the pure joy of a perfect shot. But more than anything, they taught each other how to be seen, really seen. Vanessa didn't care that Michael had been cut from the team. She didn't care that he wasn't the star athlete everyone expected him to be. She saw something else. Someone funny and thoughtful and kind. Someone who worked harder than anyone she'd ever met. Someone who got back up every time he fell down. And Michael saw Vanessa not as the quiet girl in the back of the class, but as someone brilliant and creative and wise beyond her years. Someone who thought deeply about everything. Someone who made the world more beautiful just by being in it. They started spending more time together outside of practice. They'd walk downtown to Miller's drugstore and split a strawberry milkshake. They'd go to the Cape Fear River and skip stones while Vanessa told him stories about the paintings she wanted to create someday. They'd ride their bikes to the beach and watch the sunset, talking about their futures. "What do you think you'll be doing in 10 years?" Vanessa asked him one evening in late July, their feet dangling off the pier. "Playing basketball," Michael said automatically. Then he paused. "If I'm good enough. If I can make the team next year. If—" "Michael Jeffrey Jordan," Vanessa interrupted, using his full name the way his mother did when she was serious. "Stop saying if. You're going to be great at basketball. I can see it. Everyone who watches you can see it. You just have to see it yourself." "How can you be so sure?" Michael asked, genuinely curious. "Because of the way you practice. Because you never give up. Because when you shoot that ball, you believe it's going in, even before it leaves your hands. That's not just talent, Michael. That's something special. That's greatness waiting to happen." Michael looked at her, at the certainty in her eyes, and felt something shift inside him. Maybe she was right. Maybe being cut wasn't the end. Maybe it was just the beginning. "What about you?" he asked. "What will you be doing in 10 years? Vanessa smiled, but there was something sad in it. "Painting, I hope. Creating beautiful things. Making people feel something when they look at my art." She paused. "Maybe you'll come to one of my gallery shows someday." "I'll be at every single one," Michael promised. It was a promise he'd never gotten to keep. That last week of August felt different. Michael couldn't put his finger on it, but Vanessa seemed distracted, worried. She'd space out during their conversations, her mind clearly somewhere else. When he asked if everything was okay, she'd smile and say everything was fine. But Michael knew better. On their last night together, though Michael didn't know it would be their last, sat by the river watching the stars come out. Vanessa was quiet, playing with the edge of her shirt, clearly working up the courage to say something. "Michael," she started, her voice uncertain, "I need to tell you something. Something important." "Okay," Michael said, turning to face her fully. "You can tell me anything." Vanessa opened her mouth to speak, but before any words came out, they heard someone calling her name. Her mother appeared on the path, looking distressed and urgent. "Vanessa, we need to go home, right now." "Mom, I'm just—" "Now, Vanessa." Her mother's voice had an edge Michael had never heard before, almost frightened. Vanessa stood up reluctantly, giving Michael an apologetic look. "I'm sorry. I'll see you tomorrow, okay? We can talk then." "Sure," Michael said, confused but not worried. "Tomorrow at the park?" "Tomorrow." Vanessa promised, though her voice sounded strange, like she was trying to convince herself. Michael watched her leave with her mother, both of them walking quickly back toward their car. Something felt wrong, but he couldn't identify what. He went to Impey Park the next day at their usual time. Vanessa didn't come. He went back the day after, and the day after that. On the fourth day, he rode his bike to Vanessa's house. The driveway was empty, the windows were dark. A for rent sign stood in the front yard. Michael knocked on doors up and down the street, asking neighbors what happened to the Cole family. Nobody seemed to know much. "They moved suddenly," one neighbor said. "Something about Mr. Cole's job transferring him. Had to leave right away." No, they didn't know where. It was like Vanessa had been erased from existence. Michael spent the rest of that summer looking for her, hoping for a letter, a phone call, anything. But nothing came. Eventually, school started. The varsity basketball tryouts came around again. This time, Michael made the team. He threw himself into basketball with an intensity that surprised even his coaches. Every layup, every jump shot, every hour of practice, part of it was for him, to prove he was good enough. But part of it was for Vanessa, the girl who'd believed in him when no one else did, who'd told him he was capable of greatness. He never forgot her. Even as the years passed, even as he became a star player, even as his life transformed in ways he never could have imagined, Vanessa Cole remained a tender place in his heart, his first love, his first loss. And now, lying in bed 45 years later, Michael realized that Vanessa had carried him through everything. Her voice was the one he heard in the hardest moments. "You're good enough for anything you set your mind to." Now she was back, with a letter asking to meet, saying there was something she should have told him in 1978. What had she been trying to say that last night by the river? And who was that figure in the background of their photograph, watching them from behind the trees? Michael looked at his clock, 3:17 a.m. Saturday was still days away. It was going to be a long week. Michael gave up on sleep around 4 in the morning. He went down to his home gym and started shooting baskets in the private court, the rhythmic sound of the ball bouncing echoing in the quiet house. It was what he'd always done when his mind was too full. Let his body take over, let muscle memory soothe the chaos in his thoughts. But even basketball couldn't quiet his questions about Vanessa. Over the next few days, Michael found himself distracted in meetings, distant during phone calls. His daughter Jasmine noticed during their weekly lunch on Tuesday. "Dad, you're somewhere else today," she said, setting down her fork. "What's going on?" Michael hesitated. He hadn't told anyone about the letter yet. It felt too private, too precious. But Jasmine was watching him with concern, and he realized he needed to talk to someone. "I got a letter," he said finally, "from someone I knew a long time ago. Someone important? Very important. Her name was Vanessa Cole. We were close the summer before I made the varsity basketball team." Then she disappeared. Her whole family just moved away one day without warning. No goodbye, no explanation, nothing. Jasmine's eyes widened. "Dad, I've never heard you mention her before. I haven't talked about her in years, decades, really. But I never forgot her." Michael pulled out his wallet and showed Jasmine the photograph he'd been carrying all week, the one of him and Vanessa at Impey Park. "She wants to meet on Saturday. Says she has something to tell me about that summer." Jasmine studied the photo carefully. "You both look so young, so happy." Then she frowned. "Dad, who's that in the background? Behind that tree? I don't know. I didn't even notice them when the photo was taken. But now I can't stop wondering who it was and why they were watching us." "Are you nervous about seeing her again?" Michael considered the question. Terrified, he admitted. I've faced down the best defenders in basketball history, played in front of millions of people, built businesses worth billions. But the thought of seeing Vanessa again? That scares me more than anything. Why? Because she knew me before all of this. Michael gestured vaguely at the expensive restaurant, at himself, at everything his life had become. She knew Michael Jordan, the scared 15-year-old kid who'd just been cut from the team, the one who wasn't sure if he was good enough for anything. And part of me is afraid that's still who I am underneath everything else. Jasmine reached across the table and squeezed her father's hand. Dad, maybe that's exactly why you need to see her. Maybe she's the one person who can remind you of who you were before the world told you who you had to be. Her words stayed with Michael for the rest of the week. On Wednesday, he found himself driving through Wilmington, something he hadn't done in years. The city had changed. New buildings, updated roads, the inevitable march of progress. But some things remained the same. Miller's drugstore was now a coffee shop, but the building looked identical. The community pool was still there, though renovated. And MP Park. MP Park was exactly as he remembered it. Michael parked his car and walked through the park slowly. The basketball court was newer, the surface updated, but the dimensions were the same. The bench where Vanessa used to sit reading was still there, weathered but sturdy. The trees had grown taller, their branches reaching higher into the sky. He sat on the bench and closed his eyes, letting the memories wash over him. He could almost hear Vanessa's voice reading poetry aloud, almost see her smile when he'd finally make a difficult shot he'd been practicing. "Excuse me, are you Michael Jordan?" Michael opened his eyes. A young boy, maybe 10 years old, stood a few feet away holding a basketball, his eyes wide with recognition. "I am," Michael said, smiling. Can I get your autograph? And maybe you could show me how to shoot like you?" Michael stood up. "Sure, let's see what you've got." For the next 20 minutes, Michael worked with the boy on his shooting form, adjusting his grip, showing him how to follow through. Other kids started appearing, drawn by the sight of the legend on their local court. Soon Michael was surrounded by a small crowd of children, all wanting tips, all wanting to learn from the greatest. It reminded him of that summer with Vanessa, when basketball was still pure, still simple, when it was about the love of the game, not the pressure or the expectations or the fame. "Why do you practice so much?" one little girl asked him. Michael thought about how to answer. "Because a long time ago, someone told me I was good enough for anything I set my mind to, and I decided to believe her. So I practiced and practiced until I became the player I wanted to be. But you know what? The practicing was never just about basketball. It was about proving to myself that I could do hard things, that I could get better, that I could be more than people expected." "Who told you that?" the girl asked. "That you were good enough?" Michael smiled, his heart aching with old memories. "A very special person, someone I lost for a long time, but maybe I'm about to find her again." After the kids left, Michael stayed on the court as the sun began to set. He took out his phone and, for the first time since receiving Vanessa's letter, he did what he probably should have done immediately. He tried to find information about her. Vanessa Cole was harder to find than he expected. There were several people with that name, but none that seemed to be his Vanessa. Finally, after searching through old-school records and cross-referencing with the letter's postmark, he found her. Vanessa Cole, age 60, living in Richmond, Virginia, art teacher at a local high school. Never married, no children listed in public records. Michael stared at the sparse information on his phone screen. 45 years, and Vanessa had never married. Had she been waiting for something? Or had life just taken her in a different direction? He found a few images from the high school's website. Vanessa standing with students in an art classroom, her smile warm and genuine. She looked older, of course, her hair touched with silver, but her eyes were the same. Kind, thoughtful, seeing beyond the surface of things. Michael's research was interrupted by his phone ringing. It was Marcus, his oldest friend from high school, one of the few people who'd known him before he was famous. "Marcus, hey. MJ, I heard you were in Wilmington today. Someone posted a video of you at MP Park working with some kids. What are you doing back in town?" Michael hesitated, then decided Marcus deserved the truth. Do you remember Vanessa Cole? There was a long pause. Vanessa? Man, I haven't thought about her in forever. That was the girl you were crazy about the summer before sophomore year, right? The one who disappeared? That's her. She sent me a letter. Wants to meet on Saturday. After all this time, what does she want? She says there's something she should have told me back then. Something about why she left. Marcus whistled low. That's heavy, man. Are you going to go? I have to. I need to know what happened. Why her family left so suddenly. Why she never said goodbye. Michael paused. Marcus, do you remember anything strange about that summer? Anything unusual happening before Vanessa left? Marcus thought for a moment. Not really. I remember you were obsessed with basketball, working out like crazy after getting cut. And I remember you were spending all your time with that girl. But I don't remember anything weird. Why? There's a photo of me and Vanessa at the park. Someone was watching us from behind the trees, and I never noticed at the time. I'm trying to figure out who it was. Hey, just another kid at the park? Maybe, Michael said, though he didn't believe it. Something about that figure felt intentional, purposeful. I'll let you know how Saturday goes. After hanging up, Michael drove home to Charlotte, his mind spinning with questions. That night, he pulled out old boxes from his storage room, looking for anything from that summer. He found his journal from 1978, something he'd forgotten he kept. The entries were brief, written in teenage handwriting that looked foreign to him now. But as he read through them, that summer came alive again. June 15. Met a girl named Vanessa at the pool. She's different. She sees me. June 28. Practiced for 6 hours today. Vanessa brought me lemonade and told me I was working too hard. She doesn't understand. I have to work this hard. But it's nice that she cares. July 10. Vanessa painted a picture of the river today. It was beautiful. She said she wants to paint me shooting baskets sometime. I said only if I can keep it, she promised. July 23. Almost told Vanessa I love her today. Got scared. What if she doesn't feel the same way? August 5. Something's wrong with Vanessa. She seems worried about something but won't tell me what. I asked her twice. She says everything's fine, but I know it's not. August 12. Vanessa tried to tell me something tonight, but her mom interrupted. She looked scared. I don't understand what's happening. August 13. She's gone. The whole family is gone. Nobody knows where. It's like Vanessa never existed. But she did exist. She was real. We were real. Michael closed the journal, his throat tight with emotion. He'd forgotten how deeply he'd felt everything at 15, how raw and immediate every emotion had been. Reading his younger self's words, he remembered the pain of losing Vanessa. Not just the girl, but the person who'd made him believe in himself. Over the decades, Michael had dated, married, divorced, loved, and lost again. He'd built relationships with wonderful women, had beautiful children, created a family. But there was something about Vanessa that remained untouched by time, preserved in the amber of memory. The girl who'd seen him at his lowest point and told him he was capable of greatness. And now she was back, with secrets from that summer, with explanations that were 45 years overdue. Saturday was 2 days away. Michael looked at the photograph again, at the mysterious figure in the background. Whoever you are, he thought, you're part of this story, part of whatever Vanessa needs to tell me. He just hoped he was ready to hear it. Because sometimes the truth about the past has the power to change everything about the present. And Michael Jordan, who'd built his life on confidence, on knowing exactly who he was and what he wanted, was about to discover that there were things about that summer, about Vanessa, about himself, that he'd never understood at all. The long week was almost over, and whatever came next would either give him closure on a 45-year-old question, or open doors he'd thought were closed forever. Michael woke up at 5:30 on Saturday morning, 2 hours before his alarm was set to go off. He'd barely slept, his mind cycling through 1,000 possible scenarios for the meeting with Vanessa. He went through his morning routine mechanically, coffee, shower, checking his phone for messages. Nothing from Vanessa. Of course not. They'd agreed on 2 o'clock at MP Park. There was nothing more to say until then. But the waiting felt impossible. Michael stood in his closet for 20 minutes, trying to decide what to wear. It was ridiculous. He was 61 years old, a global icon who'd worn everything from custom suits to championship jerseys in front of billions of people. Yet here he stood, paralyzed by the simple question of what to wear to meet the girl who'd known him when he was nobody. Finally, he chose jeans and a plain navy polo shirt. Nothing fancy, nothing that screamed wealth or success. He wanted to be Michael, not Michael Jordan. He wanted to be the person Vanessa remembered, or at least as close as he could get, after 45 years. His daughter Jasmine called at 8 o'clock. "Dad, how are you holding up?" "I'm fine," Michael lied. "You're not fine. You're probably pacing around your house, freaking out." Michael looked down at his feet, realizing he'd been pacing without even noticing. "Maybe a little." "It's okay to be nervous, Dad. This is huge. But remember, whatever she has to tell you, it doesn't change who you are now. It's just a piece of your past that's been missing. You're finally getting to fill in that blank." "What if I don't like what she has to say?" "Then you deal with it. You're Michael Jordan. You've dealt with everything else life has thrown at you. You'll deal with this, too." Jasmine paused. "Do you want me to come with you? I could wait in the car, or—" "No," Michael said gently. "Thank you, but I need to do this alone. This is something between me and Vanessa." "Okay, but call me afterward no matter what happens. Promise?" "I promise." After they hung up, Michael tried to distract himself. He answered emails, reviewed business documents, watched highlights from his team's recent game. Nothing worked. His mind kept drifting back to that summer, to the girl with the warm smile, to the mystery of why she left. At 11 o'clock, he couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed his keys and headed for the car. The meeting wasn't for 3 more hours, but he needed to move, to do something. He'd drive to Wilmington early, maybe walk around the city, kill time until 2 o'clock. As he drove, Michael thought about all the times over the years when he'd imagined this moment. In his 20s, he'd fantasized about Vanessa seeing him on TV, recognizing him, reaching out. In his 30s, during his first marriage, he'd occasionally wondered what might have been if Vanessa had never left. In his 40s and 50s, the fantasy had faded to a gentle nostalgia, a beautiful memory that belonged to another lifetime. But now it was real. In a few hours, he'd see Vanessa Cole again. They'd sit on that same bench at MP Park, 2 people in their 60s who'd once been 15 and in love, and she'd tell him secrets that had been buried for 45 years. Michael arrived in Wilmington at noon. He drove past his old high school, past the house where he'd grown up, past all the landmarks of his childhood. The city felt like a time capsule, each street corner holding memories. He stopped at the coffee shop that used to be Miller's drugstore and ordered a black coffee. The young barista didn't recognize him, which was a relief. Michael sat in the corner and watched people come and go. Young couples, families with children, teenagers laughing together. All of them living their lives, unaware that in this ordinary coffee shop, one of the most famous athletes in history sat alone, nervous about meeting his first love. At 1:30, Michael couldn't wait any longer. He drove to MP Park and pulled into the parking lot. The park was moderately busy. Kids on the playground, a few people walking dogs, teenagers shooting hoops on the basketball court. Michael sat in his car, watching the entrance. What would he say when he saw her? How do you greet someone who meant everything to you 45 years ago? A handshake seemed too formal. A hug seemed presumptuous. Maybe he should just let Vanessa make the first move. At 1:50, a silver sedan pulled into the parking lot and parked 3 spaces away from Michael's car. He watched as the driver's door opened, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. And then she stepped out. Vanessa Cole. She was 60 years old now, her hair silver gray and cut in a short, elegant style. She wore a simple blue dress and sandals. She looked older, of course. Time had marked her face with lines and softness, but she was still beautiful. More than that, she was still Vanessa. He could see it in the way she moved, in the slight nervousness of her smile as she glanced around the parking lot. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither of them moved. They just stared at each other across the parking lot, 2 people separated by 45 years and a few yards of pavement. Then Vanessa raised her hand in a small wave, and that simple gesture broke the spell. Michael got out of his car, his legs feeling unsteady beneath him. They met halfway between their vehicles, standing face to face for the first time since 1978. "Hello, Michael," Vanessa said softly. Her voice was deeper than he remembered, shaped by decades of life, but it was still her voice. "Vanessa." Michael's throat felt tight. He had a million things he wanted to say, but all he could manage was her name. They stood in awkward silence for a moment, then both laughed nervously at the same time. "This is strange, isn't it?" Vanessa said. "Very strange. Good strange, though, I think." Michael couldn't stop staring at her. You look wonderful. So do you. Though I've seen you on TV plenty of times over the years, so you look exactly like I expected." Vanessa smiled. "Actually, that's not true. On TV you always look so confident, so in control. Right now you look terrified." "I am terrified," Michael admitted. "I've been terrified all week." "Me too." Vanessa glanced toward the park. "Should we walk? Sit on our bench?" "Yes, let's do that." They walked side by side through the park, not touching but acutely aware of each other's presence. Michael noticed the way Vanessa still walked with a slight bounce in her step, the way she smiled at children as they passed, the way she seemed to take in everything around her with an artist's eye. The bench was unoccupied. They sat down together, leaving a careful space between them, both looking out at the basketball court where teenagers were playing. "I used to sit here and watch you practice," Vanessa said quietly. "Every day that summer. You'd shoot for hours, and I'd just sit here reading or drawing, perfectly content to be in your presence. I remember. Sometimes I'd mess up shots on purpose, just so I'd have an excuse to take a break and come talk to you." Vanessa turned to look at him, surprise in her eyes. "Really? You never told me that." "I was 15 and trying to act cool. I couldn't let you know how much I needed those breaks, how much I needed you." They fell silent, watching the teenagers play. Michael noticed Vanessa's hands were trembling slightly. She kept clasping and unclasping them in her lap. "Vanessa," he said gently, "I got your letter. I've been carrying it with me all week, along with that photograph. And I have about 1,000 questions. But the biggest one is simple. Why did you leave? What happened?" Vanessa took a deep breath, and Michael saw tears forming in her eyes. "Michael, what I'm about to tell you, it's going to change everything you remember about that summer, about us, about why we were torn apart." She reached into her purse and pulled out an old shoebox, worn at the corners and held together with a rubber band. "I need you to promise you'll hear me out completely before you react. Can you do that?" "Of course," Michael said, though his heart was racing with apprehension. Vanessa placed the shoebox on the bench between them. "This box contains things I've saved for 45 years. Letters I wrote but never sent. Photographs. Newspaper clippings about you. And something else. Something I only discovered recently that made me realize I had to find you, had to tell you the truth." She looked at Michael, her eyes full of sorrow and regret, and something else he couldn't quite identify. "That night by the river, our last night together, I was trying to tell you something important. But my mother interrupted, and then everything happened so fast. The next day we were gone, and I never got the chance to explain." Vanessa's voice cracked. "Michael, we didn't leave because of my father's job. That was a lie we told everyone. We left because—" She paused, struggling with the words. "Because my mother was sick, very sick. She'd been diagnosed with a serious illness in June, right around the time I met you. But my parents kept it secret from me at first. They wanted me to have one last normal summer, one last carefree time before everything changed." Michael reached out instinctively and took Vanessa's hand. "I'm so sorry, I had no idea. Nobody did. We were good at hiding it. But by August, my mother's condition got much worse, and my parents had to make a decision. There was a specialized treatment facility in another state, an experimental program that might save her life. But we had to move there immediately. Everything happened within 48 hours. Tears were streaming down Vanessa's face now. "I wanted to say goodbye to you, Michael. I wanted to explain. But there wasn't time, and my parents thought a clean break would be easier. They thought I'd forget about you, move on, make new friends wherever we ended up. But you didn't forget. Never, not for a single day." Vanessa squeezed his hand. "I wrote you letters every week for 5 years. They're all in this box. I wrote about missing you, about hoping we'd find each other again someday, about everything that was happening in my life. But I never sent them. Why not? Michael asked, though his voice was gentle, understanding there must have been a reason. Because Vanessa opened the shoebox with trembling fingers. Because something else happened. Something I only fully understood recently. She pulled out a stack of letters, yellowed with age, and beneath them was something else. A newspaper clipping from 1978, and another photograph. Michael's blood ran cold when he saw the photograph. It was the same image from MP Park, him and Vanessa on the bench. But this copy was clearer, less faded, and the figure in the background, the person watching them from behind the trees, was clearly visible. It was Vanessa's father. "Michael," Vanessa said, her voice barely a whisper, "my father was watching us that day. He was watching us a lot that summer. And the reason why, the reason we really left Wilmington, it wasn't just about my mother's illness." Michael stared at the photograph, his mind reeling. "I don't understand. Why was your father spying on us?" Vanessa pulled out the newspaper clipping with shaking hands. 3 months ago, I was going through my father's things. He died 10 years ago, and my mother is in a memory care facility now. I was cleaning out their storage unit when I found a box labeled Wilmington 1978. Inside were these photographs, some documents, and she unfolded the clipping. "This article about you making the high school basketball team that next year. My father had circled your name and written notes in the margins." Michael took the clipping, seeing his younger self's name highlighted, seeing notes and handwriting he didn't recognize. Exceptional work ethic, strong character, potential distraction, girl, monitor situation. "Vanessa, what is this? What was your father doing?" Vanessa's eyes met his, full of pain and revelation. "Michael, my father wasn't just watching us randomly. He'd been hired by someone who was interested in you, in your potential, in your future. And I only discovered who that person was 3 weeks ago, when I finally worked up the courage to start making phone calls and asking questions." She pulled out one more item from the shoebox, a business card, creased and faded, with a name and company Michael didn't recognize from 1978. "This is going to sound impossible," Vanessa said. "But my father was hired to observe you that summer, to report on your activities, to document your relationships, and if necessary, if necessary, to eliminate any distractions that might interfere with your basketball development." Michael felt the world tilt beneath him. "What? Vanessa, that doesn't make sense. Who would do that? I was nobody in 1978. I'd just been cut from the team, I was." "You were special," Vanessa interrupted. "Even then, someone saw it. Someone who makes it their business to identify future stars before anyone else does. Someone who believes in controlling every aspect of a young athlete's development, including their personal relationships." She looked at Michael with eyes that held 45 years of pain. "We didn't just leave because of my mother's illness, Michael. We left because my father realized what he'd been hired to do, and he couldn't go through with it. He couldn't hurt you or me. So he took the money they'd already paid him for my mother's treatment, grabbed our family, and ran." Michael sat frozen, trying to process what Vanessa was telling him. Someone had hired her father to watch him? To control his life? To eliminate distractions? Who? He finally managed to ask. "Who hired your father?" Vanessa handed him the business card, and the name written there made Michael's blood run cold, because it was a name he knew, a name connected to a basketball agency, to scouts, to a network that had touched his life in ways he'd never fully understood until this moment. "There's more," Vanessa whispered. 3 weeks ago, I tracked down the person who hired my father, and Michael, that person wants to meet with us. Both of us. They say it's time we knew the whole truth about that summer, about what they were planning, and about the other person who was involved, the one who was supposed to protect you." Michael stared at Vanessa, then at the photograph, then at the basketball court where he'd spent that summer becoming the player he was destined to be. Everything he thought he knew about that summer, about his rise to greatness, about the path his life had taken, all of it was suddenly in question. "There was someone else?" he asked. "Someone else watching us? Protecting me?" Vanessa nodded. a 13-year-old girl who lived across the park. She saw what was happening and tried to intervene in the only way she knew how. Her name was Patricia Winters. And Michael. Vanessa's voice trembled. She's the one who wants to meet with us now. She says she owes us the complete truth. Michael sat speechless, his mind spinning with revelations, with questions, with the sudden understanding that his entire life might have been shaped by forces he never knew existed. And the biggest question of all remained unanswered. If someone was manipulating his life even then, even when he was nobody, what else had they done? And what were they still doing? When? Michael finally asked. When does Patricia want to meet? Tomorrow, Vanessa said quietly. If you're willing. She lives in Durham now. She's been trying to reach you for over a year. But my people filter out most requests, Michael finished. They thought she was just another fan. She's not a fan, Michael. She's someone who's carried a secret about you for 45 years. A secret about who was really behind everything. About who wanted to control your destiny before you even knew you had one. Michael looked at Vanessa. This woman who'd been his first love, who'd disappeared from his life, who'd come back now with impossible truths. Will you come with me? He asked. To meet Patricia? I was hoping you'd ask, Vanessa said, squeezing his hand again. Because, Michael, whatever we're about to learn, whatever the truth turns out to be, I think we need to face it together. The way we should have faced everything else all those years ago. Michael nodded, unable to speak, overwhelmed by the weight of revelation and the promise of answers. The summer of 1978 hadn't been what he thought it was. And tomorrow, he'd finally learn why. Michael and Vanessa sat on the bench for a long time after that revelation, neither quite knowing what to say. The basketball court grew quiet as the teenagers left. The sun shifted in the sky, casting long shadows across MP Park. Finally, Michael spoke. Your mother. Did the treatment work? Vanessa smiled through her tears. Yes, she survived. She lived another 23 years. We got to have her for all those years because of the money my father took from that agency. It's complicated, Michael. My father did something wrong. He accepted money to spy on you, to potentially interfere with your life. But he also did something right. He refused to follow through, and he used their money to save my mother's life. So he wasn't a bad man. No, was a desperate man who made a choice in an impossible situation. And then he spent the rest of his life trying to protect us from the consequences. Vanessa wiped her eyes. He never talked about that summer, not once. When I got older and asked why we'd left Wilmington so suddenly, he'd just say it was for Mom's treatment and change the subject. He carried that guilt until the day he died. Michael thought about his own father, about the sacrifices parents make for their children. I wish I could have talked to him, told him I understood. I think he knew you would. That's probably why he saved all these documents, why he kept that photograph. Maybe he hoped that someday you'd know the whole story and wouldn't hate him for his part in it. I could never hate him, Vanessa. He gave me the greatest gift. He let us have that summer exactly as it was supposed to be. And when he realized someone wanted to manipulate us, he chose to protect us instead. Michael paused. Even though it meant taking you away from me. Vanessa reached into the shoebox again and pulled out the stack of unsent letters. I want you to have these. I wrote them over 5 years, from age 15 to 20. They tell the story of everything that happened after we left. My mother's treatment, our new life, how I thought about you constantly, how I followed your basketball career from afar. Michael took the letters carefully, as if they might disintegrate in his hands. Why didn't you send them? Even after things settled down with your mother? Because of what my father told me when I was 18. Vanessa's voice grew quiet. I'd been begging him for years to let me contact you, to explain why we'd left. Finally, he sat me down and told me part of the truth, not everything. He never mentioned being hired to watch you, but he told me that there were people interested in your career who didn't want distractions. He said that if I contacted you, if I came back into your life, I might hurt your chances at success. That's ridiculous. You inspired me, Vanessa. You never would have. I know that now. But at 18, I believed him. And as I watched you become a star in college, then get drafted, then start winning championships. I convinced myself that maybe he was right. Maybe the best thing I could do for you was stay away. Vanessa looked at Michael with regret written across her face. So I wrote my letters and kept them in a box. I told myself that someday, when your career was over and it wouldn't matter anymore, I'd find you and give them to you. But years became decades, and I lost my courage. I convinced myself you'd forgotten about me, moved on, built a life that didn't include a girl from one summer when you were 15. I never forgot, Michael said firmly. Not once. You were the person who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Every time I faced a challenge, every time I wanted to quit, I heard your voice telling me I was good enough. You've been with me every step of the way, Vanessa, even when you weren't there. Fresh tears spilled down Vanessa's cheeks. I should have sent the letters. I should have been brave enough to find you. I wasted so much time being afraid. Michael set the letters gently on the bench and took both of Vanessa's hands in his. You're here now, that's what matters. And tomorrow, we're going to get answers. We're going to find out who did this, why they did it, and what Patricia Winters knows about all of it. Are you angry? Vanessa asked. About what my father did, about what happened. Michael considered the question carefully. I'm angry that someone thought they had the right to manipulate my life. I'm angry that we lost 45 years together because of their interference. But I'm not angry at your father. He did what he thought was right to protect his family and to protect us. I can't fault him for that. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Vanessa said, There's something else in the box. Something I found that I don't understand. She pulled out a small notebook, old and worn. This was tucked in with my father's documents. It's not his handwriting. The entries are dated from that summer, and they're about you. Observations, notes about your practice habits, your personality, who you spent time with. Michael took the notebook and flipped through it. The handwriting was neat, precise, almost clinical. June 10, 1978, subject displays exceptional dedication. Practice routine exceeds normal parameters for age group. Mental toughness evident despite recent setback. Cut from team. June 24, 1978. Subject has formed attachment to female companion. V. Cole. Relationship appears genuine but may become problematic if it interferes with. Development. July 8, 1978. Subject's work ethic remains strong. Female companion appears supportive rather than distracting. Recommend continued observation. July 29, 1978. Relationship deepening. Subject may be emotionally vulnerable. E. Cole. Observer reports increasing concern. Recommend action if situation escalates. August 10, 1978. Situation resolved. Family relocating. Distraction eliminated without direct intervention. Subject free to focus on development. Michael felt sick reading the entries. Someone had been watching him that entire summer, documenting his life like he was a laboratory subject. And they'd been pleased when Vanessa left, viewing it as eliminating a distraction. Who wrote this, he asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. I don't know. The initials at the bottom of each entry are PW. Vanessa pointed to the small letters. At first, I thought maybe it was Patricia Winters, the girl who wants to meet us. But these entries talk about her separately. There's a note on August 11th that says, P. Winters, civilian observer, has been questioning E. Cole's activities. May need to address her concerns. So it can't be Patricia who wrote this. Then who is PW? That's what we need to find out tomorrow. Vanessa closed the box. Patricia told me she has documents, photographs, everything we need to understand what really happened. She said she's been collecting evidence for years, waiting for the right time to reveal it. Why now? Michael asked. Why wait 45 years? She said she wanted to wait until your career was completely over, until nothing she revealed could be used to manipulate or hurt you. And she said. Vanessa hesitated. She said there's someone else who needs to be there when we meet. Someone who was part of this from the beginning. Michael felt a chill run down his spine. Who? She wouldn't say over the phone, but she promised that everything would make sense once we heard the whole story. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The park was nearly empty, just a few stragglers heading home. Michael and Vanessa sat on their bench, surrounded by memories and mysteries, holding pieces of a puzzle they couldn't quite see the shape of yet. "I'm scared," Vanessa admitted quietly. "What if the truth is worse than we think? What if we find out things we wish we didn't know?" "Then we deal with it together," Michael said, "like we should have done 45 years ago. Whatever this is, whatever we're about to learn, we face it together." Vanessa leaned her head on Michael's shoulder, a gesture so natural it felt like no time had passed at all. "I've missed you, Michael. Every single day for 45 years, I've missed you." "I've missed you too." Michael put his arm around her, and they sat watching the sunset like they'd done so many times that long ago summer. But everything was different now. They weren't innocent teenagers anymore. They were adults who'd lived full lives, who'd experienced joy and pain, success and failure. And they were on the edge of discovering that their lives had been shaped by forces they never knew existed. "Tell me about your life," Michael said. "The years after you left. I want to know everything." So Vanessa told him. She talked about the years of her mother's treatment, the fear and hope that came with each doctor's visit. She talked about finishing high school in a new state, feeling like a ghost haunting her own life. She talked about going to art school, becoming a teacher, touching the lives of hundreds of students over the decades. "I almost got married once," she said. "His name was David. He was kind, patient, everything a woman could want. But I called it off 3 weeks before the wedding." "Why?" "Because he wasn't you." Vanessa's voice was matter-of-fact, not sad or regretful. "I know that sounds foolish, holding on to a teenage romance for decades. But it wasn't about the romance, Michael. It was about the connection. You were the person who saw me, really saw me, and I never found that again with anyone else. So I chose to be alone rather than settle for something less." Michael understood completely, because he'd done the same thing. "I got married twice," he admitted. "Both ended in divorce. I have beautiful children I love more than anything. But the marriages themselves, there was always something missing. Someone missing." They sat together as darkness fell over Empty Park, sharing the stories of their lives, filling in 45 years of blank space. And despite everything, despite the manipulation, the lost time, the mystery they were about to unravel, Michael felt something he hadn't felt in decades. He felt complete. "It's getting late," Vanessa finally said. "We should probably go. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." "Where are you staying tonight?" Michael asked. "I got a hotel room in Wilmington. I wasn't sure. I didn't know if you'd want to keep talking, or if you'd need space after everything I told you." "Have dinner with me," Michael said impulsively. "There's a restaurant downtown. Quiet place. Good food. Let's have dinner and keep talking. I don't want the day to end yet." Vanessa smiled, the same bright smile from 45 years ago. "I'd like that very much." They drove separately to the restaurant, following each other through the darkening streets of Wilmington. Over dinner, they talked about everything and nothing. Books, art, basketball, their families, their hopes, their regrets. They talked like old friends, and like people falling in love for the first time. Because in a way, they were both. It was nearly midnight when they finally left the restaurant. They stood in the parking lot, neither wanting to say goodbye. "Tomorrow at 10? Vanessa confirmed. "Patricia's house in Durham? I'll pick you up at your hotel at 8:30. We'll drive together." "Okay." Vanessa reached out and touched Michael's face gently, as if confirming he was real. "Thank you for coming today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for not hating me for staying away all these years." "I could never hate you, Vanessa. Never." Michael covered her hand with his. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we get our answers." They hugged goodbye, holding on longer than necessary, neither wanting to let go. Finally, Vanessa pulled away and got into her car. Michael watched her drive away, then stood alone in the parking lot, his mind full of questions and his heart full of emotions he thought he'd never feel again. His phone buzzed. A text from Jasmine. "How did it go, Dad?" Michael typed back. "It went well. Better than well. I'll tell you everything tomorrow." "But Jasmine, I'm about to learn something that's going to change everything I thought I knew about my life." Her response came quickly. "Whatever it is, you can handle it. You always do. Love you, Dad. Love you, too." Michael drove back to Charlotte through the dark Carolina night, the shoebox of letters on the passenger seat beside him. When he got home, he sat in his study and read them, every single one. They were beautiful and heartbreaking. A chronicle of a young girl's love and longing, written in careful script on notebook paper. Vanessa had poured her heart into these letters, describing her life, her thoughts, her feelings about Michael. She'd followed his career obsessively, cutting out every newspaper article, watching every game she could find on TV. Dear Michael, one letter from 1982 read, "I watched you play in the NCAA Championship game tonight. You were magnificent. The commentators kept talking about your competitive fire, your will to win, your determination. But I saw something else. I saw the boy who practiced alone on a dusty court, who got back up every time he fell down, who refused to let anyone tell him he wasn't good enough. I'm so proud of you. I wish I could tell you that in person." Michael wiped tears from his eyes as he read letter after letter. Vanessa had been there for all of it. Every triumph, every setback, every moment of his journey. She'd just been invisible, watching from afar, loving him silently. The last letter was dated 1983, written shortly after Michael was drafted by the Chicago Bulls. Dear Michael, this is my final letter to you. Not because I'm going to stop loving you or thinking about you, but because I've realized something. These letters aren't really for you. They're for me. They're my way of holding on to something that can never be again. You're about to start your professional career. You're going to be great. I've always known that. And I'm going to keep watching from wherever I am, cheering for you, believing in you, loving you in my own quiet way. Maybe in another life we would have had our chance. Maybe in another timeline, I never left and we grew up together. But in this life, in this timeline, the best thing I can do for you is let you be everything you're meant to be without me complicating it. Thank you for one perfect summer. Thank you for seeing me when I was just a girl with a sketchbook. Thank you for being the kindest, most determined, most genuine person I've ever known. I'll always love you, Michael Jordan, even if you never know it. Forever yours, Vanessa. Michael set down the letter and buried his face in his hands. 45 years. 45 years of lost time, of unspoken love, of two people living separate lives while carrying each other in their hearts. But they had a chance now. A second chance that most people never got. And tomorrow, they'd finally learn the truth about who tried to keep them apart and why. Michael looked at the clock. 2:47 a.m. He needed to sleep, to be sharp for whatever tomorrow would bring. But first, he did something he hadn't done since he was 15 years old. He pulled out a piece of paper and wrote Vanessa a letter. Dear Vanessa, I read all 46 of your letters tonight, every single word, and I want you to know something. You were never invisible. You were never absent. You've been with me every day of my life since that summer. Tomorrow we'll learn why we were kept apart. But tonight, I just want to tell you this. I'm glad you came back. I'm glad you had the courage to send me that letter, to meet me at our park, to tell me the truth. Whatever we discover tomorrow, whatever secrets get revealed, one thing won't change. You are and always have been the person who saw me for who I really was. That's a gift I can never repay. Sleep well. Tomorrow we face the truth together. Yours, Michael. He folded the letter, sealed it in an envelope, and set it aside to give her in the morning. Then Michael Jordan, who'd faced down the best competition in the world, who'd championships against impossible odds, who'd built an empire through sheer force of will, went to bed scared. Because sometimes the hardest opponent to face isn't on a basketball court. Sometimes it's the truth about your own life. And tomorrow, that truth was finally coming out. Michael picked up Vanessa at exactly 8:30 Sunday morning. She was waiting outside her hotel, wearing jeans and a soft green sweater, her silver hair catching the morning light. When she got into his car, he handed her the letter he'd written. "What's this?" she asked. "Something I should have written 45 years ago. Read it later when you have a quiet moment." Vanessa tucked the letter carefully into her purse, then reached over and squeezed his hand. "I barely slept last night." "Me neither. I read all your letters, every single one." "Oh God," Vanessa covered her face. "That must have been embarrassing. The desperate writings of a lovesick teenager." "They were beautiful," Michael said firmly. "They showed me who you were during all those years we were apart. And Vanessa, you were never desperate. You were devoted. There's a difference. They drove north toward Durham, the Carolina countryside rolling past outside the windows. The GPS showed they had about 90 minutes until they reached Patricia Winter's address. "Tell me about Patricia," Michael said. "When she contacted you, what did she say exactly?" Vanessa pulled out her phone and scrolled to an email. "She wrote to me 3 months ago. She said she'd been trying to reach you for over a year, but couldn't get through your management. So she tracked me down instead. Here, I'll read you part of it." She cleared her throat and began, "Dear Miss Cole, you don't know me, but my name is Dr. Patricia Winters. In the summer of 1978, when I was 13 years old, I lived across from Empey Park in Wilmington, North Carolina. I witnessed something that summer that has haunted me for 45 years. I watched two 15-year-olds fall in love on a park bench while someone observed them from the shadows. I watched as those two young people were torn apart by forces they didn't understand. One of those 15-year-olds was you. The other was Michael Jordan. I need to tell you both what I saw, what I know, and what I've discovered in the decades since. The truth is more complicated than you could possibly imagine. And it involves people who shaped Michael's destiny before he ever knew he had one. Please contact me if you're willing to hear this story. I believe you both deserve to know what really happened." Michael listened in silence, his jaw tight. "She was 13 and she saw all this?" "Apparently, when I called her, she explained that she was a basketball-obsessed kid who lived across from the park. She used to watch you practice every day. She thought you were special, different from other players, so she started documenting your practice sessions with her father's video camera. She was filming me? Yes. And in the process, she noticed your father watching us. She noticed patterns, the same car, the same man, sitting there day after day taking notes. It made her uncomfortable, so she told her older brother, who was a police officer." Michael's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What did her brother do?" "He confronted my father, asked him why he was watching teenagers in a park. My father apparently gave some excuse about being protective of his daughter, but Patricia's brother didn't buy it. He ran my father's license plate and discovered he'd been involved with some kind of sports agency that had a questionable reputation." "Did he arrest your father?" "No. Patricia's brother was young, just starting his career. He didn't have enough evidence of actual wrongdoing. But he warned my father that he was being watched. I think that's part of why my father decided to take our family and leave. He knew people were getting suspicious." They drove in silence for a while, processing the information. Finally, Michael asked, "What does Patricia do now? You said she's a doctor?" "She's a psychologist who specializes in studying high-achieving individuals, particularly athletes. She's written several books about early childhood development and how it impacts future success. Apparently, her interest in the field started with you, with watching you that summer and wondering what made you different. So I've been her research subject for 45 years? In a way. But Michael, she sounds genuinely remorseful about what happened. She told me she's carried guilt all these years, because she thinks her intervention might have contributed to my family leaving. She confronted my father, and days later we were gone. She's always wondered if she made things worse by getting involved." Michael considered this. A 13-year-old girl, watching from across the park, seeing something wrong and trying to help. She was just a kid trying to do the right thing. That's what I thought too. But there's more. Something she wouldn't tell me over the phone. She said when we meet in person, she has documents and photographs that will explain everything. Who was behind the surveillance, what they were planning, and who the mysterious PW is from my father's notebook. They stopped for coffee at a small town along the way. Sitting in a quiet corner of the cafe, Michael pulled out the notebook again and studied the entries. "These notes are so clinical," he said. "Like whoever wrote them didn't see me as a person, just as a subject to be studied and controlled. Distraction eliminated. That's what they called you leaving, eliminating a distraction. It makes me sick," Vanessa said. "The arrogance of thinking they had the right to manipulate your life, manipulate my life, just because they saw potential in your basketball talent. But who were they? And how did they even know about me? I was nobody in 1978. I'd just been cut from my high school team. Why would anyone be interested in a skinny 15-year-old who couldn't even make varsity? That's what we're about to find out. They finished their coffee and got back on the road. As they got closer to Durham, Michael felt his anxiety increasing. His entire life, he'd believed in his own story, the kid who got cut, who worked harder than anyone else, who turned determination and talent into greatness. But what if that story wasn't entirely true? What if there were puppet masters pulling strings he never saw? Michael, Vanessa said quietly, whatever we learn today, it doesn't diminish what you accomplished. Even if someone was watching you, observing you, maybe even trying to guide your development, you're the one who did the work. You're the one who practiced until your hands bled. You're the one who made the shots, won the championships, became the legend. Nobody could have made you do that. It had to come from inside you. But what if they planted the idea? What if they manipulated circumstances to push me in certain directions? Then you still chose how to respond. Free will, Michael. Nobody can take that away from you, no matter how much they try to manipulate the circumstances around it. Her words helped, but Michael still felt unsettled. They were entering Durham now, following the GPS directions to Patricia Winter's address. The house was in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood, a craftsman-style home with a well-kept garden. They sat in the car for a moment, neither moving. "Ready?" Vanessa asked. "No, but let's do it anyway." They walked up the path to the front door together. Before Michael could knock, the door opened. A woman in her late 50s stood there, tall, with graying brown hair and intelligent eyes behind stylish glasses. She wore casual clothes but carried herself with professional confidence. "Michael, Vanessa." She smiled, but it was a nervous smile. "Thank you for coming. I'm Patricia Winters. Please, come in." The house was filled with bookshelves, comfortable furniture, and afternoon light streaming through large windows. Patricia led them to a sitting room where a coffee service was already laid out. But Michael's attention was immediately drawn to the dining room table beyond, which was covered with documents, photographs, and what looked like old video equipment. "Before we get into everything," Patricia said, sitting down across from them, "I want to apologize. I've been watching you for 45 years, Michael. Not constantly, not obsessively, but watching. Following your career, documenting it, studying it. I know that sounds creepy and invasive, and I'm sorry. But I need you to understand why I did it." "I'm listening," Michael said carefully. Patricia took a deep breath. "That summer of 1978, I was 13 years old and completely obsessed with basketball. I lived across from MP Park, and I spent my days watching players practice. Most of them were just okay, going through the motions. But then you started coming to the park, and you were different." "Different how?" "You practiced like someone who had something to prove. Every shot mattered. Every drill was executed with intensity. You weren't just playing basketball. You were at war with yourself, pushing beyond normal limits. I'd never seen anything like it." Patricia smiled slightly. "So I started filming you. My father had bought me a video camera for my birthday, and I decided to document what I called the making of a great player. I thought it would be a school project or something." "And that's when you noticed Vanessa's father watching us?" "Actually, no. At first, I didn't notice anything unusual. I was focused on filming your practice sessions. But then I started reviewing the footage, and I noticed the same car appearing in the background, day after day. The same man sitting there, watching. I thought it was strange, so I started paying attention." Patricia stood and walked to the dining room table, returning with a thick folder. "This is what I documented that summer. Dates, times, observations, and this," she pulled out a photograph, "is the man I saw watching you." Michael took the photograph. It showed a car parked across from MP Park, and through the windshield, a man with a notebook. The image quality wasn't great, but the man was clearly Eugene Cole, Vanessa's father. "I showed this to my brother Tom. He was a police officer, and I asked him to look into it. Tom ran the license plate and discovered the car was registered to Eugene Cole. Then he did some more digging and found that Mr. Cole had recently deposited a large sum of money in his bank account. $10,000, which was a lot of money in 1978. Vanessa gasped. "That must have been the money for my mother's treatment." Exactly. Tom became suspicious. Where had that money come from? He traced it back to a sports management agency called Peak Performance Associates. They specialized in identifying young athletic talent and developing relationships with them early. That's not unusual, Michael said. Lots of agencies scout young talent. You're right. But Peak Performance Associates was different. They didn't just scout. They actively intervened in young athletes' lives. They believed that to create a champion, you had to control every aspect of their development from an early age. Training, nutrition, education, and especially, Patricia paused significantly. Personal relationships. Michael felt cold. They wanted to control who I spent time with? Yes. They had a theory that romantic relationships during crucial developmental years were distractions that prevented athletes from reaching their full potential. So when they identified a prospect, they'd pay someone close to that prospect, a family member, a neighbor, a coach, to observe them and report on any relationships that might become problematic. They paid my father to spy on Michael, Vanessa said, her voice shaking. And if Michael got too close to someone, they'd what? Break them up. Patricia nodded grimly. They'd find ways to eliminate the distraction. Sometimes it was subtle, encouraging families to move, offering job opportunities in other cities, spreading rumors. Sometimes it was more direct. There are reports of them threatening people, manipulating situations, doing whatever it took to keep their prospects focused solely on their sport. Michael stood up, unable to sit still. This is insane. Why would anyone go to such lengths? I was just a kid. Because they saw something in you, Michael, something special. And they believed that if they could control your development from age 15 onward, they could create the greatest basketball player who ever lived. Patricia pulled out another document. This is an internal memo from Peak Performance Associates dated June 1978. Listen to this. Subject: Michael Jordan, 15, Wilmington, Tennessee evaluation. Exceptional mental toughness. Superior work ethic. Responds to adversity with increased determination. Physical skills currently underdeveloped, but trajectory suggests significant growth potential. Competitive drive appears intrinsic. Recommendation: priority observation and development tracking. Psychological profile indicates this subject could achieve historic level of success with proper guidance and elimination of potential distractions. Michael stared at Patricia. They wrote that about me? In June 1978? Right after I got cut from the team? Yes, someone evaluated you and decided you were worth investing in. So they hired your girlfriend's father to watch you, to document your activities, and to report on your relationship. When it became clear that you and Vanessa were becoming serious, they would have instructed Mr. Cole to intervene. But he didn't, Vanessa said. He took their money, but he didn't do what they wanted. He took our family and left instead. Exactly. Which actually makes him a hero in this story. He chose his integrity and your happiness over following their orders. Patricia looked at Vanessa with sympathy. Your father saved you both from whatever they were planning. Michael paced the room, his mind reeling. Who was behind this? Who ran Peak Performance Associates? And how did they even know to look at me in the first place? Patricia's expression grew more serious. That's where things get complicated. Peak Performance Associates was shut down in 1983 after several lawsuits from families claiming manipulation and harassment. But before they closed, they had successfully signed several young athletes who went on to have significant professional careers. The agency made millions from those relationships. But someone had to be running it. Someone made the decision to target me. The agency was run by a man named Philip Westbrook, P.W. The initials in your father's notebook, Vanessa. Patricia pulled out a photograph of a man in his 40s, smiling confidently at the camera. He was a former college basketball coach who'd been fired for recruiting violations. He became obsessed with the idea of identifying and developing talent from an extremely young age. He believed the traditional system was flawed, that by the time colleges recruited players, their character and work habits were already formed. He wanted to find them earlier, shape them from adolescence. Michael studied the photograph. I don't recognize him. You wouldn't. He never approached you directly. That was his method. Stay invisible, work through intermediaries, control from the shadows. But Michael, here's the thing you need to understand. Philip Westbrook didn't just randomly choose you. Someone told him about you. Someone who saw you play and recognized your potential before anyone else did. Who? Patricia walked back to the dining room table and returned with a VHS tape. Before I show you this, I need to tell you something else. I wasn't the only person filming you that summer. Westbrook had his own documentation. After Peak Performance Associates was shut down, there was a court order to turn over all files. Most were destroyed, but some ended up in storage. I tracked them down 5 years ago as part of my research. This tape was in Michael Jordan's file. She turned on an old TV and VCR setup in the corner and inserted the tape. The screen flickered to life, showing grainy footage of MP Park in 1978. Michael watched himself, young, skinny, intense, practicing alone on the court. The footage was shot from a distance, with a telephoto lens. The camera followed his movements, zooming in occasionally to capture his face, his form, his footwork. Then the camera panned, and Michael saw himself and Vanessa sitting on the bench, talking and laughing. The footage had audio, though it was muffled and hard to hear. Still, Michael could make out his own young voice, saying something that made Vanessa laugh, her face lighting up with joy. The camera zoomed in on Vanessa's face, then on Michael's hand holding hers. A voice began narrating, a man's voice, clinical and detached. Subject displays strong emotional attachment to female companion. Relationship appears genuine and deepening. Subject's practice intensity has not diminished, suggesting relationship may not be negatively impacting development. However, potential exists for distraction as attachment grows. Recommend continued observation and preparation for intervention if necessary. Michael felt sick. Someone had been filming them, documenting their private moments, analyzing their relationship like they were laboratory subjects. The footage continued, showing more scenes from that summer. Michael practicing, Michael and Vanessa together, Eugene Cole's car in the background. Then the tape cut to different footage, filmed from inside a car. The camera was pointed at Michael's house. The narrator's voice continued, subject's home environment appears stable. Middle-class family, strong parental support. Father works in manufacturing, mother is homemaker. One older brother, also athletic. Family dynamics suggest competitive drive may be partially learned behavior. Subject appears motivated by desire to match brother's achievements. They were surveilling my house? Michael's voice was tight with anger. My family? Yes, Patricia said quietly. They wanted to understand everything about you. Your environment, your influences, your relationships. They believed that to control your development, they needed complete information. The tape continued, and then something appeared that made Michael's blood run cold. The footage showed a young Michael sitting on his front porch, and another figure approaching. A man Michael didn't recognize, wearing a coaching jacket. The narrator said, initial contact made by local intermediary. Subject receptive to coaching advice. Relationship being cultivated for future leverage. Who is that? Michael demanded. Who was talking to me? Patricia paused the tape. That's where this story takes another turn. The man in that footage was a youth basketball coach named Robert Chen. He ran a summer camp program. Do you remember him? Michael thought back, and slowly a memory emerged. There was a coach. He came to the park a few times that summer, gave me tips on my shooting form, told me about a camp he was running. I couldn't afford to go, but he said he might be able to get me a scholarship for the next year. Robert Chen was working for Peak Performance Associates. He was paid to make contact with you, to build trust, to position himself as a mentor. The plan was to slowly increase his influence in your life, guiding your development according to Westbrook's theories. Michael sank back into his chair, overwhelmed. My entire life was being manipulated, and I had no idea. Vanessa moved closer to him, taking his hand. But Michael, that's not what happened. The manipulation failed. My father refused to follow through. We left before they could do whatever they were planning. And you became great on your own terms, not theirs. Did I? Michael looked at Patricia. How do I know they didn't continue? How do I know Chen or Westbrook or others didn't keep manipulating things throughout my career? Patricia shut off the TV and sat down across from them again. Because there's one more person in this story, someone who was watching all of this happen and decided to stop it. Someone who confronted Westbrook, who threatened to expose Peak Performance Associates if they didn't leave you alone. Who? Someone you've known your entire career. Someone who's been protecting you for 45 years, making sure that your success was yours alone, making sure nobody manipulated or controlled you ever again. Patricia pulled out one more photograph, and when Michael saw it, the world seemed to stop spinning. It was a picture of a man shaking hands with Philip Westbrook. A man Michael recognized immediately. A man he'd trusted, worked with, and known for decades. "No," Michael whispered. "That's impossible." "I'm afraid it's true," Patricia said. "And Michael, that person is waiting in my study right now. They wanted to be here when you learned the truth. They want to explain everything. How they discovered Westbrook's plans, how they stopped the manipulation, and how they've spent 45 years making sure you were free to become everything you were meant to be on your own terms." Michael couldn't move, couldn't speak. Because the person in that photograph, the person apparently waiting in the next room, was someone he never would have suspected. Someone who'd been part of his life since the beginning, and someone who'd kept this secret for 45 years. "Are you ready to meet them?" Patricia asked gently. "Are you ready to hear the whole truth?" Michael looked at Vanessa, then back at Patricia. His entire understanding of his own history was crumbling, but he needed answers. "Yes," he said finally, "I'm ready." Patricia stood and walked toward the study door. And Michael Jordan prepared to learn the truth about who had really shaped his destiny. Patricia opened the study door, and Michael's heart pounded as he waited to see who would emerge. A figure stood from a chair, silhouetted against the window, then stepped forward into the light. Michael's jaw dropped. Coach Herring. The man standing before him was older now, his hair completely white, his face lined with age. But it was unmistakably Coach Clifton Herring, the man who'd cut Michael from the varsity basketball team in 1978. The man whose rejection had ignited the fire that drove Michael to greatness. "Hello, Michael," Coach Herring said quietly. "I've been waiting a long time to have this conversation." Michael stood frozen, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. "I don't understand. You cut me from the team. You told me I wasn't good enough. What do you have to do with any of this?" Coach Herring moved slowly into the room, walking with a slight limp. He looked at Michael with eyes that held both regret and resolve. "I need to tell you something I should have told you 45 years ago. Something I've carried every day since. Michael, I didn't cut you from that team because you weren't good enough. I cut you because you were too good, and I was trying to protect you." "Protect me? From what?" "From Philip Westbrook and Peak Performance Associates." Coach Herring sat down heavily in a chair. "Let me start from the beginning. In the spring of 1978, a man came to see me at school. Said his name was Philip Westbrook, and he ran an agency that identified and developed young, athletic talent. He told me he'd received a tip about a talented freshman basketball player named Michael Jordan. A tip? From who?" Coach Herring glanced at Patricia, who nodded encouragingly. "From someone who'd seen you play in a youth league game the previous summer, someone who recognized something special in you, not just talent, but mental toughness and competitive drive that was rare in someone so young." "Who was it?" Michael demanded. "I'll get to that. But first, you need to understand what Westbrook wanted. He offered me $5,000, a fortune for a high school coach in 1978, to put you on the varsity team and then act as his informant. He wanted regular reports on your development, your relationships, your psychological state. He wanted me to guide you according to his theories about developing elite athletes." Michael felt betrayed all over again. "And you took the money?" "No." Coach Herring's voice was firm. "I told him to get out of my office. I told him what he was proposing was unethical, possibly illegal, and I wanted no part of it. But Westbrook didn't give up. He started showing up at games, practices, anywhere he could observe you. He was obsessed with this idea that he could create the perfect basketball player by controlling every aspect of development from adolescence. Vanessa spoke up, her voice shaking. That's when he hired my father. Yes, when I refused to cooperate, Westbrook found another way in. He discovered that Eugene Cole, your father, was desperate for money for his wife's medical treatment. Westbrook exploited that desperation. Coach Herring looked at Vanessa with sympathy. Your father wasn't a bad man. He was trapped in an impossible situation. So why did you cut Michael from the team? Vanessa asked. How did that protect him? Coach Herring leaned forward, his expression intense. Because I realized something. Westbrook had a pattern. He targeted at young athletes who showed exceptional talent early and were already on the path to recognition. He believed he could attach himself to their success, guide them, and eventually manage their professional careers. But his system didn't work with athletes who were already succeeding. They had too many other influences, too many people around them. Understanding began to dawn in Michael's mind. You cut me to make me invisible to him. Exactly. I thought if you weren't on the varsity team, if you weren't getting attention and recognition, Westbrook would lose interest and move on to another prospect. You'd be free to develop naturally, without his manipulation. Coach Herring's voice cracked slightly. It was the hardest decision I've ever made as a coach. You deserved to be on that team, Michael. You were talented, dedicated, and you had something special. But I cut you anyway, hoping it would save you from Westbrook's interference. But it didn't work, Patricia interjected. Westbrook didn't lose interest. In fact, your rejection seemed to intrigue him even more. He became convinced that your response to adversity was exactly what he'd been looking for. Proof of the mental toughness he valued above all else. Michael paced the room, trying to absorb everything. So he kept watching me. He hired Vanessa's father. He sent that coach to befriend me. All because you cut me from the team? I'm sorry, Michael. I thought I was helping. Instead, I might have made things worse. When I realized Westbrook was still pursuing you, I didn't know what to do. I was just a high school coach. I had no power to stop a man like that. Coach Herring stood and walked to the window. That's when I reached out to the person who'd originally told Westbrook about you. I thought if they understood what was happening, they might be able to help. Who? Michael asked again, his frustration mounting. Who told Westbrook about me in the first place? Coach Herring turned to face him. Your brother, Larry. The room fell silent. Michael felt like he'd been punched in the chest. Larry? My brother Larry told some stranger about me. He didn't know what Westbrook was. Larry was 17, excited about his own basketball career, and a man approached him after a game asking about talented young players. Larry mentioned his little brother, who was incredible but still developing. He thought he was helping you get noticed. He had no idea what Westbrook really wanted. Michael's mind reeled. Larry, his older brother, his rival, his hero. Larry had inadvertently set this whole nightmare in motion. When I told Larry what was happening, he was devastated. Coach Herring continued. He blamed himself completely, so together we made a plan. Larry would go to Westbrook and pretend to be interested in having the agency represent him. He'd get close to Westbrook, learn his methods, and find a way to stop him from manipulating you. Patricia picked up the story. Larry spent the summer of 1978 essentially working undercover. He met with Westbrook regularly, pretended to be interested in Peak Performance Associates, and gathered evidence of their unethical practices. He learned about the surveillance on you, about Eugene Cole's involvement, about Robert Chen, and the other people Westbrook had planted around you. Larry did that? Michael couldn't believe what he was hearing. Why didn't he tell me? Because you were 15 and in love and dealing with being cut from the team. Larry thought the last thing you needed was to know you were being watched and manipulated. He wanted to handle it himself, to protect his little brother. Coach Herring's voice was soft. Larry loved you, Michael. Everything he did was to protect you. Michael sat down, his legs suddenly weak. His brother Larry had died in 1993, murdered during a robbery. Michael had grieved him deeply, but they'd never been as close as Michael wished. There had always been distance between them, a sense that Larry was holding something back. Now he understood why. What happened next? Vanessa asked quietly. Patricia pulled out more documents. Larry collected evidence for 2 months. Photographs, recordings, documents showing that Westbrook was paying people to surveil multiple young athletes across several states. In August, Larry and Coach Herring went to the authorities with everything they'd gathered. The police investigated, but it was complicated, Coach Herring said. What Westbrook was doing wasn't technically illegal, just deeply unethical. But Larry had documented enough to threaten serious consequences. He went to Westbrook with an ultimatum. Stop pursuing Michael Jordan completely, destroy all files related to him, and never contact anyone in his life again. Or Larry would take everything public, destroy Peak Performance Associates' reputation, and make sure no athlete would ever work with them again. Westbrook agreed. He had no choice. Larry had enough evidence to ruin him. So they made a deal. Westbrook would leave you alone, and in exchange, Larry would keep quiet about the surveillance and let Westbrook continue his business with other prospects. At least until authorities could build a proper case. Michael felt anger rising in his chest. So Westbrook just moved on to manipulate other kids? Not for long, Patricia said. Larry kept gathering evidence, and by 1983 there were enough complaints and lawsuits that Peak Performance Associates was shut down completely. But during those 5 years, Larry's deal protected you. Westbrook couldn't contact you, couldn't plant people around you, couldn't interfere in your life at all. And Larry never told me. Michael's voice was hollow. He made me promise not to tell you either, Coach Herring said. Larry believed that knowing the truth would mess with your head, make you paranoid, make you question everything about your success. He wanted you to believe that your achievements were yours alone, earned through hard work and talent, not tainted by knowing that people had tried to manipulate you. Michael stood and walked to the window, looking out at Patricia's quiet neighborhood. His whole life, he'd carried certain beliefs about himself. That he was cut from the team because he wasn't good enough, that his brother was distant because of sibling rivalry, that his success was built entirely on his own determination. Now all of those beliefs were crumbling. There's more, Patricia said gently. After Larry died, Coach Herring asked me to continue watching over you, in a sense. Not surveillance, nothing like what Westbrook did. But I've kept track of your career, documented it, made sure nobody else tried to manipulate or control you the way Westbrook wanted to. That's why you've been following me for 45 years? Yes. I'm a psychologist who studies high achievement because of you, Michael, because I witnessed what almost happened to you, and I wanted to understand how to protect other young athletes from similar manipulation. I've written extensively about the ethics of talent development, about the dangers of over-involved adults controlling children's lives. Your story, though I've never told it publicly, has been the foundation of my entire career. Michael turned to look at the 3 people in the room. Patricia, who'd documented his life, Coach Herring, who'd cut him to protect him, and Vanessa, who'd been torn away from him by forces beyond their control. Why now? He asked. Why tell me all this now, after 45 years? Coach Herring stood slowly. Because I'm dying, Michael. I have maybe 6 months left, and I couldn't go to my grave without telling you the truth. You deserve to know why I cut you. You deserve to know that your brother loved you enough to sacrifice his relationship with you to protect you. You deserve to understand that while people tried to manipulate your life, they failed. Your success is yours. You earned every bit of it. Michael felt tears burning in his eyes. Coach, I spent years angry at you for cutting me. I used that anger as fuel. And now you're telling me you did it to help me? I know. And I'm sorry for the pain it caused. But Michael, look what you became. Look what you accomplished. Yes, I cut you from that team. Yes, your brother kept secrets from you. Yes, people tried to manipulate you. But you, Coach Herring pointed at him with emphasis, you took all of that and became the greatest basketball player who ever lived. Not because of what we did or didn't do, but because of who you are. The determination, the work ethic, the competitive fire, that's all you. We didn't create that. We just tried to protect it. Vanessa came and stood beside Michael, taking his hand. He's right. Whatever happened behind the scenes, you're the one who did the work. You're the one who got back up Every time you were knocked down. You're the one who won the championships, inspired millions of people, became a legend. Michael looked down at Vanessa, this woman who'd been taken from him by manipulation, but who'd loved him silently for 45 years. He looked at Patricia, who'd spent her career protecting other young athletes from what almost happened to him. He looked at Coach Herring, the man he'd resented for decades, who was now revealed to have been protecting him all along. "My brother," Michael said quietly. "Larry knew all of this, carried it all by himself, and I never knew." "He wanted it that way," Coach Herring said. "Larry told me once, my little brother is going to be the greatest basketball player who ever lived. And when he gets there, I want him to know it's because of his hard work and talent, not because his older brother had to save him from some predator. That's how much Larry believed in you, Michael. That's how much he loved you." Michael felt something break open inside him. Years of complicated feelings about his brother. Years of wondering why they weren't closer. Years of grief from losing Larry too soon. Now he understood. Larry had sacrificed their closeness to protect him. Had kept a secret that created distance between them because he thought it was what Michael needed. "I need to see the rest," Michael said suddenly. "Everything you have. All the documents, all the footage, everything Westbrook collected. I need to understand exactly what happened." Patricia nodded. "I have it all. But Michael, I need to warn you. Some of it is disturbing. Watch yourself be observed and analyzed like a specimen. Seeing how much they documented about you and your family, reading their cold assessments of your relationships, it's hard to see. I need to see it anyway. I need to know the full truth." For the next 3 hours, Patricia walked Michael and Vanessa through everything she'd collected. They watched more surveillance footage from 1978. Michael practicing, Michael with his family, Michael and Vanessa together. They read through Westbrook's files, seeing the clinical notes about Michael's psychological profile, his family dynamics, his relationship patterns. They saw Robert Chen's reports about his interactions with Michael, his assessments of Michael's receptiveness to coaching, his recommendations for how to build influence. They read Eugene Cole's sparse notes about Vanessa and Michael's relationship, seeing how reluctant Eugene had been to report on them, how his notes grew shorter and less detailed as the summer progressed. Evidence of a man who couldn't bring himself to fully betray the young people he was supposed to be surveilling. They read Larry's counter-surveillance notes, documenting Westbrook's activities, naming other athletes he was targeting, building the case that would eventually shut down Peak Performance Associates. And they read Coach Herring's personal journal from that year, seeing his anguish over the decision to cut Michael, his fear that he was making a terrible mistake, his relief when Larry agreed to help protect Michael. June 1, 1978, cut Michael Jordan from the team today. Hardest thing I've ever done. The look on his face will haunt me. But Westbrook is dangerous, and I can't let him get his hooks into this kid. Michael has something special, a drive and determination I've rarely seen. He deserves the chance to develop that naturally, without manipulation. June 15, 1978. Saw Michael at the park today. He's practicing like a man possessed. Part of me is proud. He's using the rejection as fuel. Part of me feels guilty. He shouldn't have to carry this anger that I created, but better angry and free than controlled by Westbrook. August 14, 1978. The Cole family left town yesterday. Eugene came to see me before they left. He was crying. Said he couldn't do what Westbrook wanted, couldn't hurt those kids. Said he was taking his family and running, using the money to save his wife. I told him he was doing the right thing, but I'm worried about what Westbrook will do next. August 20, 1978. Larry went to Westbrook with the evidence. I've never seen a 17-year-old stand up to an adult with such courage. He told Westbrook to stay away from his brother or face complete destruction of his business. Westbrook backed down. Thank God. Michael is safe now. He doesn't know it, but he's safe. Michael read through tears, seeing himself through Coach Herring's eyes, a talented kid who deserved protection, who was surrounded by adults trying to keep him safe even as other adults tried to exploit him. Why didn't Larry ever tell me? Michael asked again, though he already knew the answer. We had years after this. We could have talked about it. He was afraid, Coach Herring said simply. Afraid you'd feel like your success was tainted somehow. Afraid you'd lose confidence. Afraid you'd change how you approached the game. Larry wanted you to stay hungry, stay driven, stay pure in your pursuit of greatness. He thought the truth would complicate that. Vanessa squeezed Michael's hand. Maybe he was right. Maybe if you'd known at 17 or 22 or even 30 that people had tried to manipulate you, it would have affected you. But you're 61 now. Your career is complete. Your legacy is secure. Now you can know the truth without it changing anything about what you accomplished. It changes everything about how I understand my past, though. Coach Herring wasn't the villain I thought he was. My brother wasn't distant. He was protective. Even Eugene. Michael looked at Vanessa. Your father wasn't a spy. He was a man in an impossible situation who chose to protect us. And you weren't just a kid with exceptional talent and work ethic, Patricia added. You were a kid who had people trying to exploit you, and people trying to protect you, all without you knowing. You navigated through all of that manipulation and counter-manipulation and still managed to become exactly who you were meant to be. That's remarkable, Michael. That says something profound about who you are at your core. Michael stood and walked to the dining room table, looking at all the evidence spread out before him. 45 years of secrets, of hidden protection, of love expressed through silence and sacrifice. There's one thing I still don't understand, he said. If all of this happened in 1978 and Westbrook was shut down in 1983, why does it matter now? Why did you wait until 2024 to tell me? Coach Herring and Patricia exchanged glances. Because Philip Westbrook is still alive, Patricia said quietly. And 2 years ago, he started reaching out to sports agencies again, proposing a new version of his old system. He's in his 80s now, but he's still obsessed with the idea of identifying and controlling young talent. He's been contacting people, sharing his theories, trying to convince a new generation that his methods work. How do you know this? Because he contacted me. He knew I'd studied high-performance athletes. He didn't know I'd been documenting his manipulation of you. I'd kept that research private. He wanted to partner with me, to use my credentials to legitimize his approach. Patricia's expression was disgusted. I refused, obviously, but I started investigating what he was doing, who he was talking to. And I discovered something disturbing. She pulled out a recent document, a proposal dated 2023. Westbrook has been using you as proof of concept, Michael. He's been telling agencies and coaches that his methods work because he identified you in 1978, before anyone else saw your potential. He's claiming credit for your development, saying that his surveillance and planning, even though it was interrupted, laid the groundwork for your success. Michael felt fury rising in his chest. He's taking credit for my career after trying to manipulate my life? Yes, and he's using that claimed success to convince others to let him work with current young athletes. He's got a whole new system designed, updated for the digital age, social media monitoring, data analytics, psychological profiling. He wants to do to today's 15-year-olds what he tried to do to you, but with more sophisticated tools. We can't let that happen, Michael said immediately. That's why I wanted to tell you everything now, Patricia explained. We need to stop Westbrook before he hurts anyone else. But to do that, we need you to go public with what he tried to do to you. We need people to understand that his methods aren't just unethical. They're harmful. They robbed you of a relationship you valued. They caused pain to everyone around you. And they would have controlled and stunted your development if the people who loved you hadn't fought back. Michael looked at Coach Herring. You said you're dying. That's why you're ready to tell this story now. You want to make sure Westbrook can't hurt anyone else before you're gone. Yes, I've kept your secrets for 45 years, Michael, but I can't keep them anymore. Not if it means watching Westbrook manipulate another generation of kids. I know going public will be hard. I know it will change how people view your success. But it's the right thing to do. Michael turned to Vanessa. What do you think? Vanessa looked at him with those warm, thoughtful eyes he'd fallen in love with 45 years ago. I think your brother gave up his relationship with you to protect you. I think Coach Herring sacrificed his reputation in your eyes to protect you. I think my father gave up his integrity and ran away to protect us. All of them made hard choices because they thought it was right. Now it's your turn to make a hard choice. What does protecting the next generation of young athletes mean to you? Michael knew what he had to do. We go public, he said firmly. We tell the whole story. We expose what Westbrook tried to do and what he's trying to do now. And we make sure no other 15-year-old ever has to go through what I went through. Being watched, analyzed, manipulated by people who see them as products to be developed rather than people to be protected. Patricia smiled with relief. I was hoping you'd say that. I've already been in contact with several journalists who've been investigating unethical practices in youth sports. They'll handle the story sensitively, focusing on Westbrook's predatory behavior rather than sensationalizing your personal history. When? Michael asked. Whenever you're ready. But Michael, once this comes out, people will know everything. About Westbrook's surveillance, about Coach Herring cutting you to protect you, about your brother's sacrifice, about Vanessa's father. Your origin story, the one everyone thinks they know, will change completely. Michael looked around the room at the three people who'd kept his secrets. Patricia, who'd documented everything. Coach Herring, who'd made the hardest coaching decision of his career. And Vanessa, who'd been stolen from him by forces they couldn't control. The origin story everyone knows isn't true anyway, Michael said quietly. I was never just a kid who got cut and worked harder. I was a kid who people tried to control and exploit, but who was protected by people who loved him enough to sacrifice for him. That's a better story, I think. A more honest one. He took Vanessa's hand and looked at Coach Herring. Let's tell the truth. All of it. For Larry, who gave up his closeness with me to protect me. For Eugene, who ran away rather than betray us. For you, Coach, who's been carrying this guilt for 45 years. And for all the 15-year-olds out there right now who Philip Westbrook thinks are his next projects. Coach Herring's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Michael. For understanding. For forgiving me. There's nothing to forgive, Coach. You saved me from something I didn't even know I needed saving from. That makes you a hero, not a villain. They spent the rest of the afternoon planning how to release the story, which documents to make public, how to protect the identities of people who might face consequences. Through it all, Michael kept coming back to one thought. His brother Larry had given everything to protect him and had never asked for recognition or gratitude. Just like Coach Herring, just like Eugene Cole. Love, Michael realized, sometimes looked like silence, sometimes looked like distance, sometimes looked like sacrifice that went unrecognized for decades. And he'd been surrounded by that kind of love his entire life without knowing it. As the sun began to set and they prepared to leave Patricia's house, Michael pulled Coach Herring aside. How long do you have? He asked gently. 4 months, maybe 6. Pancreatic cancer. There's nothing they can do. Then I'm going to spend as much time with you as I can in those months. You've been a part of my story since the beginning. You should be here for the ending, too. Coach Herring embraced him, and Michael felt the older man's shoulders shake with emotion. I'm sorry I hurt you, Michael. Even if it was for the right reasons. I'm sorry. You didn't hurt me, Coach. You protected me. And I'm grateful, more grateful than I can possibly express. They drove back toward Wilmington as darkness fell, Michael and Vanessa quiet in the car, processing everything they'd learned. Finally, Vanessa spoke. Are you okay? I don't know, Michael admitted. Everything I thought about my past has been turned upside down, but in a strange way it makes sense now. All those years wondering why Larry and I weren't closer, why Coach Herring cut me, why your family disappeared. Now I understand. It was all connected. It was all people trying to protect me from something I didn't know existed. Do you wish they'd told you at the time? Michael thought about this carefully. No, Larry was right. If I'd known at 15 or 22 that people were trying to control my life, it would have messed with my head. I would have questioned everything, been paranoid, lost the purity of my drive to succeed. Not knowing allowed me to just focus on basketball, on getting better, on proving myself. In a way, their silence was a gift. They pulled into the hotel parking lot. Vanessa didn't move to get out. There's still one thing that doesn't make sense to me, she said. Patricia said there was someone else. Someone who was supposed to protect you. She mentioned it in her email, remember? Someone who was supposed to protect you. But everyone we heard about today was protecting you. So who was she talking about? Michael frowned. You're right, she did say that. But we never found out who. His phone rang. It was Patricia. Michael, I'm sorry to call so late. But there's one more thing I forgot to give you before you left. Something I think you need to see before tomorrow. What is it? A letter. From your brother Larry. He wrote it before he died, and asked that it be given to you only after you knew the whole truth about 1978. Coach Herring has been holding on to it for 31 years. He wants to give it to you tomorrow. But I thought you might want to know it exists. It apparently explains the one piece of the story we haven't told you yet. Michael's heart raced. What piece? The identity of the person who told Larry about Westbrook in the first place. The person who started the chain of events that led to your protection. Larry knew, but he made everyone promise not to tell. He said you'd understand why when you read his letter. Michael and Vanessa looked at each other. There was more. There was always more. I'll come by in the morning to pick it up, Michael said. I'll be here. And Michael, whatever the letter says, remember, everyone involved loved you. That's what this is really about. After they hung up, Michael sat in the car, emotionally exhausted, but unable to rest. One more secret, Vanessa said softly. One more piece of the puzzle. I'm not sure I can handle any more revelations today. Then don't. Read the letter tomorrow. Tonight, just be with me. Just be present. The past has waited 45 years. It can wait one more night. Michael looked at her and smiled. You're right. Come on, I'll walk you to your room. At her door, they stood facing each other, neither wanting to say good night. Thank you for being here today, Michael said. For going through all of this with me. I don't think I could have handled it alone. You wouldn't have been alone. You've never been alone, Michael. That's what today taught us. You've always been surrounded by people trying to protect you, trying to help you, trying to love you, even when you couldn't see it. She kissed him gently on the cheek, then slipped inside her room. And Michael Jordan, the man who'd faced every challenge life threw at him, who'd stared down the best competitors in the world, who'd built a legacy that would outlive him. That man drove back to Charlotte carrying the weight of 45 years of secrets finally revealed, but also carrying hope, because tomorrow he'd read Larry's letter. Tomorrow he'd learn the final piece of the puzzle, and tomorrow he'd begin the process of telling the truth. Not just to the world, but to himself. The truth about who he really was, and who had helped him become that person. The truth, after 45 years, was finally coming into the light. Michael didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind replaying everything he'd learned. Coach Herring cutting him to protect him. Larry going undercover to gather evidence against Westbrook. Eugene Cole running away rather than betray two teenagers. Patricia documenting everything to protect future young athletes. And somewhere in all of this was one more secret. One more person who'd been part of his story without him knowing. At 6 in the morning, he gave up on sleep and called Patricia. I know it's early, he said when she answered. But I can't wait. Can I come get the letter now? I thought you might call. Coach Herring is already here. He spent the night in my guest room. He wanted to be here when you read it. Come whenever you're ready. Michael showered, dressed, and drove to Durham. He texted Vanessa, getting Larry's letter this morning. Will call you after I read it. Her response came immediately. I'll be waiting. Whatever it says, remember who you are. Patricia's house looked different in the morning light. Less mysterious, more ordinary. But Michael's heart still pounded as he walked up the path. Coach Herring answered the door. Michael, come in. They sat in the same living room as yesterday, morning sun streaming through the windows. Coach Herring held an envelope, yellowed with age, addressed in handwriting Michael recognized instantly as Larry's. Your brother gave this to me in July 1993, about a month before he died, Coach Herring said. He told me to hold on to it until you knew the full truth about 1978. He said when that day came, you'd need to read this to understand why everything happened the way it did. Did you read it? Yes. Larry wanted me to. He said I was part of the story too, and I deserved to know his side of it. Coach Herring's eyes were wet. Michael, your brother loved you more than anything in this world. Everything he did, every choice he made, every secret he kept, it was all for you. He handed Michael the envelope. Michael's hand shook as he opened it and pulled out several pages of notebook paper, covered in Larry's neat handwriting. The letter was dated July 15, 1993, 31 years ago, just weeks before Larry was killed. Michael began to read. Dear Michael, if you're reading this, it means Coach Herring finally told you about 1978 and what Philip Westbrook tried to do. It means you know about the surveillance, the manipulation, the plan to control your development. It means all the secrets we kept to protect you have finally been revealed. I'm glad. I've wanted to tell you 1,000 times over the years, but I made a promise to keep silent until you were ready. Coach Herring will know when that time is. He's always had good judgment about these things. There's a part of the story you still don't know, though, a part I made everyone promise never to reveal. But you deserve to know now. You deserve to understand who really started all of this. Who saw your potential before anyone else, who inadvertently brought Westbrook into our lives, and who spent the rest of their life trying to make up for that mistake. Michael, I wasn't the one who told Westbrook about you. I lied about that to protect someone else. Michael stopped reading, his heart pounding. Larry had lied? Then who actually told Westbrook? The person who first noticed you, who saw something special in you, who told the wrong person about your talent, was someone who loved you unconditionally. Someone who only wanted the best for you, but didn't understand the consequences of their pride. And excitement. It was Dad. Michael's vision blurred. Their father, James Jordan? In the spring of 1978, Dad was at one of my games, and he started talking to a man who introduced himself as a talent scout. The man asked if Dad knew any other talented young players. Dad, being Dad, immediately started bragging about you. His younger son, who had incredible work ethic, who was going to be special, who just needed time to develop. Dad gave this man your name, told him where you practiced, described your dedication. He thought he was helping you. He thought he was getting you noticed by someone who could open doors. He had no idea he was talking to Philip Westbrook. A few weeks later, when Coach Herring told me what was happening, when I learned that Westbrook was surveilling you and planning to manipulate your life, I confronted Dad. He was devastated. He broke down crying, Michael. I'd never seen our father cry before. He said he'd destroyed your future by trying to help it. He said he'd put you in danger by bragging about you to a stranger. I made him promise never to tell you. I told him that you needed to focus on basketball, that knowing about this would mess with your head, and I promised I'd fix what he'd accidentally started. I'd protect you from Westbrook, and Dad would never have to carry the guilt of you knowing what happened. Dad agreed, but the secret ate at him. For the rest of his life, he carried the weight of knowing he'd almost destroyed the thing he loved most, his son's chance at a future in basketball. Every game he watched you play, every achievement you earned, he felt both pride and guilt. Pride in what you'd become, guilt over what almost happened because of him. Michael lowered the letter, tears streaming down his face. His father, James Jordan, who'd been his biggest supporter, his most enthusiastic fan, who'd come to every game, who'd believed in him when no one else did. His father had been carrying this secret for 15 years before he died in 1993. Coach Herring spoke softly. Your father was a good man who made an innocent mistake. He couldn't have known what Westbrook was. Michael kept reading. I need you to understand something, Michael. Dad didn't just feel guilty. He devoted the rest of his life to making up for his mistake. He became your most vocal supporter, not just because he loved you, but because he was making sure everyone knew how special you were. He wanted the whole world to see what he saw in you, to recognize your talent and work ethic. And he watched you constantly. Not surveillance like Westbrook wanted, but protective observation. He was always checking for signs that someone was trying to manipulate you or control you. He became hyper-vigilant about who was around you, who wanted to get close to you, who might have ulterior motives. Do you remember how Dad was always there? How he insisted on driving you to practices and games? How he wanted to meet every coach, every teammate's parents? every adult who showed interest in your development. That wasn't just parental involvement, Michael. That was protection. Dad was making sure no one like Westbrook ever got close to you again. Michael remembered. His father had been intensely involved in his basketball life, sometimes embarrassingly so. James Jordan had questioned coaches, scrutinized recruiters, been suspicious of agents and scouts. Michael had sometimes found it overwhelming, this constant presence and vigilance. Now he understood why. When I went to confront Westbrook in August 1978, Dad wanted to come with me. He wanted to threaten Westbrook himself to make him pay for trying to hurt his son. But I told him to stay home. I told him that the best thing he could do was be there for you, support you, and never let you know what almost happened. So that's what Dad did. For 15 years he carried this secret. He was the perfect father, the perfect supporter, but inside he was terrified that his one mistake would somehow come back to hurt you. The last conversation I had with Dad before I wrote this letter, he told me something I want you to know. He said, "Larry, when Michael makes it to the NBA, when he becomes everything we know he's going to become, I'll finally be able to breathe. I'll know that my mistake didn't ruin him. I'll know that he made it despite what I almost did to him." Well, Michael, you made it. You're in the NBA now. You're already becoming great. And somewhere, Dad is breathing easier, believing that his mistake didn't hurt you after all. But here's what I need you to understand. Dad's mistake wasn't a mistake at all. Yes, he told the wrong person about you. Yes, he inadvertently brought Westbrook into our lives. But Dad's love for you, his pride in you, his belief in you, that's what started everything good in your career too. Dad is the one who told you that you could be great. Dad is the one who made you believe in yourself even after Coach Herring cut you. Dad is the one who drove you to practice at 5 in the morning and picked you up at midnight. Dad is the one who sacrificed so you could go to basketball camps and get better shoes and have every opportunity. Westbrook saw you as a product to develop, but Dad saw you as a son to love and support. That made all the difference. If you're reading this letter, there's a chance Dad might not be alive anymore. I don't know when Coach Herring will decide it's time to tell you everything. But if Dad is gone, I need you to know this. He loved you perfectly. He made one innocent mistake and spent the rest of his life making up for it. And his love, not Westbrook's manipulation, not my protection, not Coach Herring's sacrifice. His love is what made you who you are. Forgive him for the mistake he didn't mean to make. Remember him for the father he chose to be every single day after. I love you, little brother. I'm sorry I couldn't be closer to you. I'm sorry the secrets I kept created distance between us. But I'd make the same choice again if it meant protecting you from knowing how close you came to being controlled and manipulated. You're going to be the greatest basketball player who ever lived. Not because of what anyone did or didn't do to you, but because of who you are. Trust that. Believe that. Know that. Your brother Larry Michael finished the letter and sat in silence, tears falling onto the pages. His father, his wonderful, loving, flawed father, who'd made one mistake and had carried the weight of it until the day he died. Patricia appeared with a box of tissues. Larry showed me that letter before he gave it to Coach Herring. He wanted me to know the full story, too. Your father was a good man, Michael. He died never knowing that I knew, Michael whispered. He died still carrying that guilt. Yes, Coach Herring said gently. But he also died seeing you win your 3rd championship. He died knowing you'd become everything he believed you could be. That gave him peace, Michael. Larry's letter says it. Your father was able to breathe easier because you made it. Michael thought about his father, James Jordan, who'd been murdered in July 1993, just 2 months after Larry wrote this letter. His father had been sleeping in his car at a rest stop when 2 teenagers robbed and killed him. Michael had been devastated, had retired from basketball for a year and a half because the grief was too overwhelming. He'd never known his father was carrying this secret, never knew that every game James Jordan attended, every drive to practice, every conversation about basketball. All of it had been tinged with protective vigilance and quiet guilt. There's something else, Patricia said carefully. Something I discovered in my research that I think you should know. It's about your father's death. Michael looked up sharply. What about it? After your father was killed, I became suspicious. The timing, just weeks after Larry wrote that letter, just when someone might have been preparing to tell you the truth about 1978. I wondered if it was really just a random robbery. Michael's blood ran cold. Are you saying someone killed my father because of this? Because of Westbrook? No, Patricia said quickly. No, I investigated thoroughly. It really was a random crime, committed by two teenagers who had no connection to Westbrook or Peak Performance Associates. But Michael, there's something else. When the police inventoried your father's belongings, there was a notebook in his car, a journal he'd been keeping. She pulled out a photocopied document. I tracked down copies of his journal entries through the police records. Your father had been writing about you, about that summer of 1978, about what he witnessed in the years after. He was documenting everything, as if he was creating a record in case you ever needed to know the truth. Michael took the photocopied pages. His father's handwriting was shakier than Larry's, less neat, but still readable. The entries were dated from 1978 through 1993, June 1978. I made a terrible mistake today. Told a man about Michael's talent, his potential. The man seemed interested, asked questions. I was proud, excited to talk about my son. But something felt wrong. His questions were too specific, too calculated. I have a bad feeling about this. August 1978, Larry told me what that man tried to do, what I almost let happen to Michael. I can never forgive myself. But I can spend every day making sure my son is protected. No one will hurt my boy, not while I'm alive. March 1982, watched Michael play today. He's extraordinary. Everyone sees it now. But I keep watching the crowd, watching for people who might want to use him. I'll never stop watching. I'll never stop protecting. June 1991, Michael won another championship today. I cried watching him. Not just from pride, but from relief. He made it. Despite what I almost did to him, he made it. Maybe someday I can tell him. Maybe someday he'll understand. July 1993. Larry wrote a letter for Michael, explaining everything about 1978. He's giving it to Coach Herring to hold until the right time. Larry says if anything happens to him, the letter will eventually find Michael. I'm glad. Michael should know the truth someday. He should know how many people loved him enough to protect him. And he should know that his old man made a mistake, but spent every day after trying to make it right. The last entry was dated July 22, 1993, the day before James Jordan was killed. Michael is the greatest basketball player in the world. But more than that, he's a good man, a kind man. Whatever mistakes I made, whatever almost happened, didn't destroy the goodness in him. That's all a father can hope for, that his children become good people despite his failures. I'm so proud of you, son, so proud of who you are. Michael couldn't see the page anymore through his tears. His father's last written words had been about him, about pride and love and hope that Michael would understand someday. He knew, Michael said hoarsely. The day before he died, Dad knew Larry had written me a letter. He knew that someday I'd learn the truth. Yes, Coach Herring said, and I think he was ready for that. He'd carried the secret for 15 years. He'd protected you for 15 years. He was ready for you to know. Michael stood and walked to the window, trying to compose himself. Two men who'd loved him, his brother and his father, had both died carrying secrets meant to protect him. Both had left behind letters trying to explain. Both had sacrificed closeness with him to keep him safe. Larry and Dad are both gone, Michael said quietly. I can never thank them, never tell them I understand, never let them know they're forgiven for mistakes that weren't really mistakes at all. Vanessa's voice came from behind him. Michael turned to see her standing in the doorway. She must have let herself in while he was reading. They know, she said softly, coming to stand beside him. Wherever they are, they know. Because the proof of their love is standing right here. You became everything they believed you could be. You became it despite the manipulation, because of the protection, through all the secrets and sacrifices. That's their thank you, Michael. Your success, your character, your life. That's how they know it was worth it. Michael pulled Vanessa close, holding her while he cried for the father and brother he'd lost, for the 15 years of secrets they'd carried, for the love they'd expressed through silence and sacrifice. Patricia and Coach Herring quietly left the room, giving them privacy. After a while, Michael pulled back and wiped his eyes. "There's more, isn't there? You said yesterday that Patricia mentioned someone who was supposed to protect me, but we still don't know who that was. Larry protected me, Dad protected me, Coach Herring protected me, Eugene protected us. Who else was there?" Vanessa hesitated. "Patricia pulled me aside this morning when I arrived. She said there's one more thing, a video from 1978 that explains everything. She wanted to wait until you'd read Larry's letter before showing it to you." "A video? Of what?" "She wouldn't say, just that it's the final piece of the puzzle. The thing that ties everything together and explains why all of this happened the way it did." They found Patricia and Coach Herring in the study. Patricia had set up the old TV and VCR again. "This is the last thing," Patricia said. "After this, you'll know everything." This footage is from August 13, 1978, the day after Vanessa's family left Wilmington. "I filmed it from my bedroom window overlooking the park." She pressed play. The screen showed MP Park in the late afternoon. The basketball court was empty. The bench where Michael and Vanessa used to sit was empty. Then a figure appeared, walking slowly into frame. It was 15-year-old Michael, alone, looking devastated. He sat on the bench and buried his face in his hands. Michael, watching the video, felt his heart break all over again, seeing his younger self's pain. Then another figure appeared on the screen, a man approaching the bench. Michael recognized him immediately, even after 45 years. It was his father, James Jordan. On the video, James sat down beside his son. The audio was distant but audible. "She's gone, Dad. Vanessa's whole family just disappeared." "I know, son, I know. Why? Why would they leave without saying anything? Did I do something wrong?" "No, Michael. You didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes things happen that are beyond our control. I loved her, Dad. I know I'm only 15, but I really loved her." James put his arm around his son. "I know you did, and that's okay. Love doesn't have a minimum age requirement." Young Michael looked up at his father. "What am I supposed to do now?" "You do what you've been doing. You practice. You get better. You prove everyone who doubted you wrong. And you remember that the people who matter, the people who really see you and believe in you, they don't disappear. They stay. Vanessa saw me. She believed in me. Then she's still with you, Michael, in here." James tapped his son's chest. "The people who really love us, who really believe in us, they never truly leave. They become part of who we are." There was a long silence on the video. Then young Michael said, "Dad, promise me something. Anything, son. Promise me you'll never leave. Promise me you'll always be here." James Jordan pulled his son close. "I promise, Michael. I'll always be here for you. Always. Nothing will ever change that." The video ended. Michael sat frozen, staring at the blank screen. His father had made a promise to always be there, and he'd kept it. For 15 years, until the day he died, James Jordan had been there for every game, every practice, every moment, protecting, supporting, loving. And the cruel irony was that James had died believing he'd failed somehow, believing his one mistake had nearly destroyed his son's future, never knowing that Michael would eventually learn the truth and understand. "That's why this all matters," Patricia said quietly. "That's why I documented everything, why Coach Herring kept the secrets, why Larry made the sacrifices he did. Because your father made you a promise that day. He promised to always be there for you. And everyone else, your brother, your coach, Vanessa's father, me. We all became part of keeping that promise after your father couldn't anymore." Michael finally understood. The whole complicated web of secrets and sacrifices, surveillance and protection, all of it had been about love. Imperfect love, expressed through difficult choices, but love nonetheless. "I need to go somewhere," Michael said suddenly, standing up. "There's something I need to do." He drove with Vanessa to the cemetery where his father and brother were buried. They stood before the two headstones, side by side, the Carolina sun warm on their shoulders. "Hey, Dad, hey, Larry," Michael said, feeling foolish talking to granite markers but needing to say the words anyway. "I know everything now. Coach Herring told me about 1978. I read your letter, Larry. I read Dad's journal entries, and I want you both to know something." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Dad, you didn't make a mistake. You were proud of your son, and you told someone about him. That's what proud fathers do. What happened after, that wasn't your fault. And the 15 years you spent protecting me, watching over me, being there for every moment, that was everything. You kept your promise. You were always there, just like you said you would be." Michael wiped his eyes and continued, "And Larry, you gave up so much for me. You kept secrets that created distance between us. You sacrificed our closeness to protect me. But brother, I need you to know, we were close. Maybe not in the way we both wanted, but in the way that mattered most. You were always looking out for me, always protecting me, always believing in me. That's the closest two brothers can be." Vanessa stood beside him, her hand in his, supporting him through this moment. "I became who I am because of you both. Not because of what Westbrook tried to do, not despite the manipulation, but because I had a father who loved me enough to spend 15 years making up for one innocent mistake, and because I had a brother who loved me enough to stand between me and anyone who wanted to hurt me." Michael placed his hand on his father's headstone, then on Larry's. "Thank you. For everything you did, for everything you sacrificed, for all the secrets you kept and the love you showed in ways I couldn't see until now. I understand. I forgive you, though there's nothing to forgive. And I love you both, always." They stood in silence for a long time, then walked slowly back to the car. "What happens now?" Vanessa asked. Michael thought about the question. He had all the answers now. He knew who'd tried to manipulate him, who'd protected him, who'd sacrificed for him. He knew the full truth about 1978 and everything that came after. But he also had a decision to make about what to do with that truth. "Tomorrow," he said, "we meet with the journalist Patricia contacted. We tell the whole story. About Westbrook, about his new attempts to manipulate young athletes, about what happened to me and what we need to prevent from happening to others." And today, Michael looked at Vanessa, this woman who'd been stolen from him 45 years ago, but who'd never stopped loving him, and smiled. "Today, we keep the promise my father made to always be there. We honor what Larry sacrificed by living the life they protected. We do what Eugene Cole did. We choose love over manipulation, connection over control. What does that mean, practically? It means we stop letting the past steal any more of our present. Come on, there's something I want to show you." They drove back to MP Park. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the basketball court. Michael grabbed a ball from his trunk, he always kept one in his car, and walked onto the court. "You're going to play basketball?" Vanessa asked, confused. "No. I'm going to teach you properly this time, the way I should have 45 years ago if we'd had more time." For the next hour, Michael taught Vanessa, really taught her, how to shoot. He showed her the mechanics, the footwork, the follow-through. He was patient when she missed, encouraging when she made a shot, present in every moment. And Vanessa laughed like she was 15 again, like the world was full of possibility, like love was the simplest thing in the universe. They played until the sun set, until the park lights came on, until they were both breathless and happy. And finally living in the present instead of being haunted by the past. As they sat on their bench afterward, Vanessa said, "Michael, I need to tell you something. Something I was trying to say that last night in 1978 before my mother interrupted us." "I know," Michael said gently. "I read it in one of your letters. You loved me." "No," Vanessa said. "I mean, yes, I loved you, but that's not what I was trying to say. I was trying to tell you that I'd seen my father watching us. I'd noticed him sitting in his car for days, taking notes. I was trying to warn you that something strange was happening." Michael stared at her. "You knew your father was surveilling us? I suspected something was wrong, but I didn't understand what. I thought maybe he was just being overprotective. But I wanted to tell you, wanted to ask if you'd noticed anything. Then my mother came and we left, and I never got the chance." Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. "Maybe if I'd told you sooner, if I'd spoken up, things would have been different." "Or maybe they wouldn't have," Michael said. "Maybe everything happened exactly as it needed to. Because look at us, Vanessa. We're here now. 45 years later, but we're here. And maybe we needed those 45 years to become the people we are now, people who can appreciate what we have, who understand the value of the sacrifice others made for us. Do you really believe that? I'm starting to. Michael pulled her close. Tomorrow we tell the world what happened. We expose Westbrook and try to protect other kids from what almost happened to me. But tonight, let's just be two people who found their way back to each other against impossible odds. They sat on the bench as night fell over MP Park, surrounded by the ghosts of their younger selves, protected by the love of people who'd sacrificed everything to keep them safe. And Michael Jordan realized that his greatest achievement wasn't 6 championships or 5 MVP awards, or his place in history as the greatest basketball player who ever lived. His greatest achievement was this moment right here, understanding the love that had surrounded him his entire life, honoring the sacrifices made for him, and finally being present enough to receive the gift that had been waiting 45 years. Tomorrow would bring revelations, press conferences, difficult conversations about manipulation and protection, and the ethics of youth sports development. But tonight was about love, pure, uncomplicated, hard-won love, and after 45 years, that was enough. The morning air was crisp as Michael and Vanessa drove to Patricia's house for the final meeting. They'd spent the previous evening processing everything. The revelations about Michael's father, Larry's letter, the weight of 45 years of secrets finally brought into the light. Now came the hard part, deciding what to do with all that truth. Patricia's dining room had been transformed into a war room. Documents covered every surface, organized into neat stacks. A laptop sat open on the table, and 3 other people were already there when Michael and Vanessa arrived. Michael, Vanessa, thank you for coming. Patricia gestured to the others. This is Rebecca Chen, investigative journalist for Sports Illustrated. Marcus Williams, attorney specializing in youth sports ethics. And you already know Coach Herring. Rebecca stood and shook Michael's hand. She was in her 40s, with intelligent eyes and a firm handshake. Mr. Jordan, thank you for agreeing to speak with us. What happened to you in 1978 is part of a much larger pattern we've been investigating. Your story could help protect countless young athletes. That's why I'm here, Michael said, taking a seat. Vanessa sat beside him, her presence grounding him. Marcus Williams opened a briefcase and pulled out more documents. I've been tracking Peak Performance Associates and Philip Westbrook for 7 years. After they were shut down in 1983, Westbrook went quiet for a while. But in the last 5 years, he's resurfaced with a new approach. He's not running an agency anymore. He's consulting, advising other agencies and coaches on what he calls holistic athlete development, which is code for manipulation and control, Rebecca added. We've documented at least 15 cases in the past 3 years where young athletes, kids between 13 and 16, have had their lives systematically controlled by adults using Westbrook's methods. Parents moved to different cities. Relationships with friends ended suddenly. Educational choices dictated by coaches or advisors. Patricia pulled up a presentation on her laptop. I've been collecting data on this for years. The pattern is always the same. Someone identifies a young athlete with exceptional potential. They convince the parents that to maximize that potential, they need complete control over the child's development, training, education, nutrition, and especially social relationships. She clicked through slides showing case studies, their names redacted for privacy. This boy was a tennis prodigy. At 14, his coaches convinced his parents to homeschool him and cut off contact with his girlfriend, because the relationship was distracting. He made it to the professional tour at 17, burned out completely at 19, and attempted suicide at 20. Michael felt sick. That could have been me. Yes, Patricia said, if your father hadn't been consumed with protecting you after his initial mistake, if your brother hadn't intervened, if Coach Herring hadn't made the hard choice to cut you, any one of those protective actions failing, and you might have ended up like this young man. She showed another case. This girl was a gymnastics phenomenon. At 13, Westbrook-trained coaches separated her from her family, controlled every aspect of her life, and pushed her to the point of breaking. She never made the Olympic team. She developed an eating disorder that nearly killed her. She's 26 now and still in therapy. Vanessa squeezed Michael's hand. How is Westbrook still doing this? How is he not in prison? Because technically, he's not breaking any laws, Marcus explained. He's not the one directly controlling these kids. He's consulting, advising, teaching his methods to others. And the parents consent to everything. They believe they're helping their children succeed. That's the insidious part, Rebecca said. Westbrook has figured out how to make parents complicit in the control. He convinces them that love means sacrifice, that supporting their child's dream means eliminating all distractions, that they're bad parents if they don't follow his system completely. Coach Herring spoke for the first time. He's weaponizing parental love, taking the natural desire to help your child succeed and twisting it into something toxic. James Jordan fell for it initially. He was proud of Michael and wanted people to notice his son's talent. That's normal. But Westbrook turned that normal pride into an opportunity for exploitation. Michael stood and walked to the window, his emotions churning. So what's the plan? How do we stop him? Rebecca pulled out a thick folder. We publish a comprehensive investigation. We document Westbrook's history, including what he tried to do to you. We show the pattern of manipulation across decades. We expose the consultants and agencies still using his methods. And we call for regulation, actual laws that protect young athletes from this kind of systematic control. But we need you, Michael, Patricia said. Your story is the one that will make people pay attention. You're arguably the greatest basketball player in history. If people learn that someone tried to manipulate and control your development, if they understand that you succeeded despite that manipulation, rather than because of it, it changes the narrative. It also changes how people see me, Michael said quietly. Right now, I'm the kid who got cut and worked harder than anyone to become great. That's a story about determination and self-reliance. If we tell the truth, I become the kid who was almost controlled by a predator, who had to be protected by his father and brother and coach. That's a different story, a weaker one. No, Vanessa said firmly. It's a stronger story. It's a story about love. About people who saw someone trying to exploit you and said no. About sacrifice and protection and choosing what's right over what's easy. That's not weakness, Michael. That's the most powerful story there is. Coach Herring stood and moved beside Michael at the window. For 45 years, I've watched you carry a story that wasn't completely true. I watched you believe you were cut because you weren't good enough, when the truth is you were cut because you were too good, and I needed to protect you. I watched that false narrative drive you to incredible heights, yes, but also to unnecessary pain. You spent your whole career trying to prove you were good enough, when the truth is you were always good enough. More than good enough. Michael's eyes burned with tears. But that drive, that chip on my shoulder, that's what made me great. No, Patricia interjected. Your talent made you great. Your work ethic made you great. Your competitive spirit made you great. The chip on your shoulder just made you angry. And maybe you didn't need to carry that anger for 45 years. Maybe you could have been just as great without it. Or maybe greater, Vanessa added. Because you would have been playing for the love of the game instead of to prove something to people who were wrong about you. Michael turned to face them all. If we do this, if we tell the whole story, what happens to my father's reputation? To Larry's? People will know they kept secrets. That Dad inadvertently brought Westbrook into our lives. I don't want people to judge them for choices they made to protect me. That's exactly why we need to tell it correctly, Rebecca said. Not as a story of mistakes and secrets, but as a story of love and protection. Your father made one innocent error and spent 15 years making up for it. Your brother sacrificed his relationship with you to keep you safe. Coach Herring damaged his own reputation in your eyes to protect your future. Those aren't scandals, those are acts of profound love, Marcus added, and legally we'll frame everything carefully. Eugene Cole will be protected. We'll describe him as a man in desperate circumstances who ultimately chose to protect you rather than betray you. Robert Chen and others who worked for Westbrook will be named, but in the context of them being manipulated or paid by Westbrook. The focus stays on Westbrook himself and the system he created. Patricia pulled up one more slide. This is what we're up against. The screen showed a photograph of Westbrook at a recent conference teaching a room full of coaches and sports administrators. The title of his presentation was Maximum Youth Athletic Potential, a Systematic Approach. He gave this talk 6 months ago, Patricia said. 200 people attended. He's teaching the next generation of coaches and administrators how to identify and control young talent. And his proof of concept? He uses you, Michael. He tells people, I identified Michael Jordan when he was 15 years old, before anyone else saw his potential. My methods work. Michael felt rage building in his chest. He's taking credit for my success? After trying to manipulate and control me? Yes, and he's using that false credential to gain access to today's young athletes. That's why we need to tell the truth. Not just for historical accuracy, but to protect the 15-year-olds out there right now who Westbrook and his disciples are targeting. Michael sat back down, his decision crystallizing. What exactly do you need from me? Rebecca opened her notebook. An interview. On the record, telling your story. What Westbrook tried to do, how your family and coach protected you, how you succeeded despite his manipulation, not because of it. We'll corroborate everything with Coach Herring's testimony, Patricia's documentation, and the evidence Larry collected. Will people believe it? This all sounds so conspiracy theory-ish, a secret agency trying to control teenage athletes? That's why we have documentation. Marcus gestured to the stacks of papers. Court records from the 1983 shutdown of Peak Performance Associates. Police reports from when Patricia's brother investigated Eugene Cole. Financial records showing payments to Eugene and others. Video footage Patricia collected. Larry's evidence file. Your father's journal. We have proof of everything. And we have other victims, Rebecca added. People who were targeted by Westbrook's methods over the years. Athletes who are willing to come forward and tell their stories alongside yours. You won't be alone in this, Michael. Vanessa spoke up. What about me? What about my father's role in all this? We'll tell that story too, Rebecca assured her, with your permission. Eugene Cole, as a man who was desperate to save his wife, who took money from Westbrook but couldn't follow through with the manipulation, who ultimately chose to protect you and Michael by taking his family and running. It's a powerful part of the story. It shows that even people who initially cooperate with Westbrook eventually realize the harm he's causing and try to stop it. My father died believing he was a coward who ran away, Vanessa said quietly. I'd like people to know he was actually a hero who saved 2 kids from something terrible. Then let us tell that story, Rebecca said. Michael looked around the room. At Patricia, who'd spent 45 years documenting the truth. At Coach Herring, who'd kept painful secrets to protect him. At Vanessa, who'd been stolen from him but never stopped loving him. At these journalists and lawyers who wanted to use his story to protect others. Okay, he said finally. Let's do it. Let's tell the truth. All of it. Patricia smiled with relief. Thank you, Michael. This is going to help so many people. They spent the next 4 hours planning. Rebecca asked detailed questions about the summer of 1978, about meeting Vanessa, about noticing Eugene Cole's car, about Robert Chen's approaches, about the day Vanessa disappeared. Michael answered everything, Vanessa filling in details from her perspective. Coach Herring described the day Westbrook approached him, the decision to cut Michael, the agonizing months of watching Michael practice alone while knowing he was protecting him from something Michael couldn't see. Patricia walked them through her documentation, video footage, photographs, notes she'd collected over decades. She showed them the evidence Larry had gathered, the files from Peak Performance Associates shutdown, the recent materials about Westbrook's resurgence. Marcus explained the legal strategy, how they'd present the information to avoid defamation claims, how they'd protect sources, how they'd handle the inevitable pushback from Westbrook and his supporters. By early afternoon, they had a plan. Rebecca would write the main article for Sports Illustrated. Patricia would publish an academic paper in a psychology journal about the ethics of youth athlete development. Marcus would work with legislators on potential regulations. and Michael would do a series of interviews. Rebecca's article first, then television appearances, then possibly a longer-form documentary. "This is going to be everywhere," Rebecca warned. "Once we publish, every media outlet will want to talk to you about it. Your social media will explode. People will have strong opinions. Some will support you, some will question why you waited so long to speak out, some will accuse you of trying to stay relevant or rewrite history." "I can handle it," Michael said. "I've faced criticism before." "Not like this," Marcus cautioned. "This isn't criticism of your basketball performance. This is people questioning your origin story, your family, your relationships. It's going to be deeply personal." Vanessa took Michael's hand. "But it's also true. And the truth matters more than being comfortable." "There's one more thing we need to discuss," Patricia said carefully. "Philip Westbrook himself. Once this story breaks, he'll respond. He'll probably deny everything, accuse us of lying, maybe even threaten legal action. Are you prepared for that?" Michael thought about the man who'd tried to control his life, who was now taking credit for his success, who was targeting a new generation of young athletes with the same manipulative methods. "Let him come," Michael said. "I've faced down the best defenders in basketball. I can face down a man who preys on children's dreams." Coach Herring stood slowly, his illness evident in the effort it took. "I want to make a statement, too. I want people to know why I cut Michael, what I was protecting him from. I want other coaches to understand that sometimes protecting a young athlete means making decisions that hurt in the short term, but save them in the long term." "That's important," Rebecca said, making notes. "The coach's perspective. The impossible choices adults have to make when they see a child being targeted." They worked through lunch, ordering sandwiches and continuing to plan. Michael found himself energized despite the emotional weight of the conversation. For 45 years, he'd been living with incomplete information about his own life. Now, finally, he understood the full picture. And more importantly, he could use that understanding to help others. As the afternoon wore on, they discussed timing. Rebecca wanted to publish in 2 weeks, giving her time to write the comprehensive piece, fact-check everything, and coordinate with Michael's team for the inevitable media storm. 2 weeks, Michael said. "That's enough time to prepare, to talk to my family about what's coming, to get ready for this to become public." "Your children should know first," Vanessa said. "Before they read about it in the media, they should hear the full story from you." "You're right." Michael thought about Jasmine and his other children. "I'll talk to them this week. Explain everything. Make sure they understand why this matters." Patricia began packing up the documents. "I'll put together a comprehensive evidence file for you to keep. Everything we discussed today, the documentation, organized so you can reference it when you need to. This is your story, Michael. You should have complete access to the facts." Coach Herring pulled Michael aside as the meeting broke up. "Thank you for doing this, for being willing to tell the truth even though it's difficult. Your father and Larry would be proud." "I hope so," Michael said. "I'm doing this for them as much as for the kids who need protection now. I want people to know what Dad and Larry sacrificed. I want their love to mean something beyond just our family. It will. Trust me, it will." As Michael and Vanessa prepared to leave, Rebecca stopped them. "One more thing. The article is going to need a strong closing, something that ties everything together and points toward the future. Do you know what you want that message to be?" Michael thought for a moment. "I want people to understand that success isn't about being isolated and controlled. It's about being supported and protected. I became great not because someone tried to manipulate every aspect of my life, but because people loved me enough to stop that manipulation. That's the message. Love and protection create greatness, not control and isolation." "That's perfect," Rebecca said, writing it down. "That's exactly the message people need to hear." They drove back toward Wilmington as the sun began to set. Michael was quiet, processing the enormity of what they'd just set in motion. In 2 weeks, the world would know the truth about 1978. His origin story, the narrative that had defined his career, would change forever. "Are you scared?" Vanessa asked. "Terrified," Michael admitted, but also relieved. "I've been carrying this incomplete story my whole life. Now I get to tell the true one. And if telling my story protects even one 15-year-old from what almost happened to me, it's worth it. Your father would be proud. So would Larry. I hope so. Michael paused. Vanessa, once this story breaks, you're going to be in the spotlight too. People will want to interview you, know about our relationships, ask about your father. Are you ready for that? Vanessa smiled. I've been invisible for 45 years. I think I can handle a few weeks of attention. Besides, I want people to know about my father. I want them to understand that he was a good man who made one difficult choice and then did the right thing. That's his legacy, and he deserves to have it told properly. They stopped for dinner at a quiet restaurant, sitting in a corner booth where they could talk privately. Over their meal, they discussed the next steps, Michael talking to his children, Vanessa preparing for the media attention, both of them getting ready for their lives to change again. You know what's strange? Michael said. I thought learning the truth about 1978 would make me feel manipulated or angry or cheated somehow. But instead, I feel grateful. Grateful for everyone who protected me. Grateful for the sacrifice they made. Grateful that I get to honor them by telling this story. That's because you've always been able to transform adversity into strength, Vanessa said. That's who you are, Michael. Not because of what anyone did or didn't do to you, but because of who you chose to be at your core. After dinner, Michael drove Vanessa back to her hotel. They sat in the parking lot, neither wanting the day to end. In 2 weeks, everything changes, Vanessa said. Everything already changed, Michael replied. The moment you sent me that letter, the moment we sat on that bench at MP Park, the moment we decided to face the truth together. That's when everything changed. The article is just making it public. Vanessa leaned over and kissed him softly. Thank you for including me in this, for not shutting me out when things got complicated. I couldn't do this without you. You're part of the story, Vanessa. You always have been. And this time, we get to tell it together. She smiled and got out of the car, then paused. Michael? That thing I was trying to tell you in 1978, the night before we left? I finally get to say it now. What is it? That I saw a future with you. Even at 15, even when it seemed impossible, I saw us together. And 45 years later, here we are. Maybe some things are just meant to be, no matter how many obstacles get in the way. She walked into the hotel, and Michael sat alone in his car, overwhelmed by the truth of her words. They'd been torn apart by manipulation, separated by secrets, divided by circumstances beyond their control. But somehow, impossibly, they'd found their way back to each other. And now they'd use their story, their painful, complicated, beautiful story. Protect others from the same manipulation they'd faced. Michael drove home to Charlotte, his mind already composing what he'd say to his children, how he'd explain the secrets their grandfather and uncle had kept, how he'd help them understand that sometimes love looks like sacrifice and protection rather than proximity and openness. When he got home, he sat at his desk and wrote a letter, not to send to anyone, but to organize his thoughts. Dear Dad and Larry, in 2 weeks the world is going to know what you did for me. They're going to understand the sacrifices you made, the secrets you kept, the love you showed in ways I couldn't see for 45 years. I wish you were here to see it. I wish I could thank you in person, could tell you that I understand now, could let you know that I'm not angry about the distance or the secrets. I'm grateful. Grateful that when I needed protection, you were there. Grateful that when I needed someone to stand between me and people who wanted to use me, you stood firm. Grateful that you loved me enough to make hard choices. Dad, your one mistake, telling Westbrook about me, wasn't really a mistake at all. It was a father being proud of his son. What you did after that, the 15 years of vigilant protection, that's what defines you. Not the initial error, but the sustained love. Larry, you could have told me the truth at any time. You could have shared the burden, let me help carry it. But you chose to protect me from even knowing I needed protection. That's a kind of love most people never experience. I'm sorry I didn't understand while you were alive. I'm sorry we lost years of closeness because of the secrets you felt you had to keep. But I promise you both this. Your sacrifices will matter beyond just me. By telling our story, we're going to protect other kids from what almost happened to me. We're going to shine a light on people like Westbrook, who prey on young athletes and their families. We're going to make sure other fathers don't feel the guilt you carried, Dad. We're going to make sure other brothers don't have to make the choices you made, Larry. Your love is going to save people you never met. That's a legacy worth having. I love you both. Always. Michael he folded the letter and put it in his desk drawer. Tomorrow he'd call his children and start preparing them for what was coming. Tomorrow he'd begin the process of changing his public narrative from myth to truth. But tonight he sat alone in his study, surrounded by the trophies and awards and accolades of a legendary career, and understood something he'd never fully grasped before. His greatest achievement wasn't anything he'd accomplished on a basketball court. His greatest achievement was being loved well enough that people sacrificed their own peace, their own relationships, their own truth, to protect him. And now, finally, he got to honor that love by telling the world what it had meant. In 2 weeks, everything would change, but the love that had carried him through 5 years of partial truth would remain, because some things, the important things, never change at all. They just finally get recognized for what they've always been. The next morning, Michael called his daughter Jasmine and asked her to come over. He'd decided to tell his children the full story before it became public, but he wanted to start with Jasmine. She'd been the first to notice something was different when he received Vanessa's letter. She arrived at noon, finding her father in his study surrounded by documents, photographs, and old letters spread across his desk. "Dad, what's all this?" She picked up one of the photographs, young Michael and Vanessa at MP Park. "Sit down, sweetheart. I need to tell you something about your grandfather and your Uncle Larry, something I just learned myself a few days ago." For the next 2 hours, Michael told Jasmine everything. He showed her the surveillance footage, read her excerpts from Larry's letter and James Jordan's journal, explained Philip Westbrook's plan to control his development, described how his father and brother had protected him without him knowing. Jasmine cried when she heard about her grandfather's guilt, about the 15 years he'd spent making up for one innocent mistake. She cried harder when she learned what Uncle Larry had sacrificed. "Grandpa carried that guilt his whole life?" she asked, her voice breaking. "He never got to know that you understood?" "No. He died still carrying it. That's part of why I need to tell this story publicly. So people understand what he did, how much he loved me, how his protection shaped everything that came after." Jasmine wiped her tears and looked at her father with new understanding. "This is why you were always so protective of us, why you questioned every coach, every trainer, every adult who wanted to work with us. You were doing what Grandpa did, watching for people who might try to use us." Michael hadn't thought about it that way, but she was right. "I guess I learned from him, even without knowing the full story. I learned that protecting your children sometimes means making unpopular choices, asking hard questions, being the suspicious parent who everyone thinks is overreacting." "But Dad, you know this is going to change everything, right? Your whole origin story, the kid who got cut and worked harder than anyone, that's what everyone knows. That's what inspired millions of people. When they learn the truth, that you were cut to protect you, not because you weren't good enough. It changes the narrative," Michael finished. "I know. But maybe the real story is more important than the inspirational myth. Maybe people need to know that success isn't just about individual determination. It's also about being surrounded by people who love you enough to protect you." Jasmine nodded slowly, processing. "When is this coming out?" 2 weeks. Sports Illustrated is publishing a comprehensive investigation into Philip Westbrook and his methods. My story is the centerpiece, but there are other victims too, other athletes whose lives were manipulated or damaged by his approach. And Vanessa? Where does she fit into all this? Michael smiled, thinking about her. Vanessa is the reason I learned any of this. Her father was hired to surveil us, but he couldn't go through with it. He took his family and ran instead. Vanessa spent 45 years thinking we were separated because of her mother's illness. She only recently discovered the truth about why they really left. "Do you love her?" Jasmine asked directly. "I mean, I know you loved her when you were 15. But now, after all this?" Yes, Michael said without hesitation. I love who she was then, and I love who she's become. She's the person who saw me before I was famous, before I was successful, when I was just a scared kid who'd been cut from a team. That kind of love, that kind of seeing, it doesn't fade just because time passes. Jasmine stood and hugged her father. I'm glad you found her again. I'm glad you're telling the truth, even though it's scary. And Dad? Grandpa and Uncle Larry would be so proud of you. I hope so, baby. I really hope so. Over the next week, Michael told his other children the same story. Each of them reacted differently. Some with anger at Westbrook, some with sadness for their grandfather's burden, some with awe at Uncle Larry's sacrifice. But all of them understood why their father needed to go public. You're doing this to protect other kids, his son Marcus said. That's what Grandpa and Uncle Larry would want. They protected you. Now you're protecting the next generation. Michael also spent time with Coach Herring, whose health was visibly declining. They sat together in Coach's living room, looking through old team photos, talking about the past. Do you regret it? Michael asked. Cutting me? Carrying that secret all these years? Coach Herring thought carefully before answering. I regret that it hurt you. I regret the years you spent thinking you weren't good enough when the truth was you were too good. But do I regret protecting you from Westbrook? Never. I'd make the same choice again in a heartbeat, even knowing how angry I was, how much that anger drove me. Michael, you would have been great with or without that anger. Your talent, your work ethic, your competitive spirit, those things were always there. The anger just gave you a false narrative about where your greatness came from. It made you think you had to prove something, when the truth is you never needed to prove anything to anyone. Michael sat with that idea. What would his career have been like without the chip on his shoulder? Without the burning need to prove everyone wrong? Would he have been as dominant, as driven, as successful? I'll never know, he said aloud. I'll never know who I would have been without that anger. No. But you can choose who you'll be now. Now that you know the truth, now that you understand you were always good enough, you get to decide what comes next. That's a gift, Michael. Not everyone gets a second chance to rewrite their understanding of themselves. The conversation stayed with Michael over the following days. He was 61 years old, his playing career long over, his legacy established. But Coach Herring was right. He got to decide what came next. He got to choose how to use this truth, how to honor the sacrifices made for him, how to protect others the way he'd been protected. Meanwhile, Rebecca Chen was finalizing her article. She sent Michael a draft, asking him to verify facts and approve quotes. Reading it was surreal, seeing his life laid out in journalistic prose, seeing the conspiracy that had swirled around him documented with dates and evidence and testimony. The article was titled, The Making of a Legend, How Michael Jordan Was Almost Controlled by a Sports Predator, and How His Family Saved Him. It was comprehensive, fair, and devastating. Rebecca had interviewed Coach Herring, Patricia Winters, several other victims of Westbrook's methods, and experts in sports psychology and ethics. She'd obtained court documents from the 1983 shutdown of Peak Performance Associates, police reports, financial records, and she'd woven it all together into a narrative that was both personal and systemic, Michael's story as a window into a much larger problem. The article ended with Michael's quote, I became great not because someone tried to manipulate every aspect of my life, but because people loved me enough to stop that manipulation. Real success comes from support and protection, not control and isolation. That's the message I want young athletes and their families to understand. It's perfect, Michael told Rebecca when they spoke on the phone. You told it exactly right. Thank you for trusting me with your story, Rebecca replied. This is going to make a difference, Michael. I've already heard from several youth sports organizations who want to implement new protections based on what we're revealing. 3 days before publication, Michael received an unexpected phone call. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number, but something made him answer. Mr. Jordan? The voice was elderly, refined, vaguely familiar, though Michael couldn't place it. My name is Philip Westbrook. I believe you know who I am. Michael's blood ran cold. How did you get this number? I have my ways. I've been hearing rumors, Mr. Jordan. Rumors that you're planning to go public with certain allegations about me and my work in the 1970s and 80s. I wanted to speak with you directly before you make a decision you might regret. Is that a threat? Not at all. Simply an offer to tell you my side of the story. You see, I think there's been a misunderstanding about my intentions back in 1978. I never wanted to harm you or control you. I simply recognized exceptional talent and wanted to ensure it was properly developed. Michael felt anger rising but kept his voice calm. By hiring someone to spy on me? By paying Vanessa's father to report on my relationship? By planning to isolate me from anyone you deemed a distraction? There was a pause. I see you've been told a very one-sided version of events, Mr. Jordan. I'm 87 years old now. I don't have many years left. Before I go, I'd like the chance to explain my methods, my philosophy, my genuine belief that I was helping young athletes reach their potential. By controlling every aspect of their lives, by protecting them from the distractions and pressures that derail so many promising careers. Mr. Jordan, look at yourself. Look at what you became. Doesn't that suggest that someone's methods were effective? I became great despite your interference. Not because of it. I became great because my father, my brother, and my coach protected me from you. Westbrook's voice hardened slightly. And yet here you are, arguably the greatest basketball player in history. Perhaps you should consider that my identification of your potential, my belief in your capabilities before anyone else saw them, played a role in that outcome. You're taking credit for my success after everything you tried to do? I'm simply pointing out that cause and effect are complicated. You were cut from that team, which everyone agrees was the catalyst for your exceptional work ethic. But why were you cut? Because your coach was trying to hide you from me. So in a sense, my presence, even in opposition, helped create the circumstances that forged your greatness. Michael stood and began pacing, fury making it impossible to sit still. That's twisted logic. You tried to manipulate my life, and when people stopped you, you want credit for creating the conditions of my success? That's like an arsonist taking credit for the beautiful new building that gets built after he burns down the old one. A colorful analogy, but not entirely accurate. Mr. Jordan, I'm calling to make you an offer. Don't publish your story. Don't participate in this attack on my legacy and methods. In exchange, I'll publicly acknowledge that I was wrong to approach your situation the way I did. I'll donate a substantial sum to youth sports programs in your name. We can both move forward without dragging each other through the mud. This isn't about dragging you through the mud. This is about protecting current young athletes from the predatory methods you're still promoting. Predatory? Westbrook's voice rose. I've devoted my life to helping young athletes achieve greatness. My methods are based on decades of research and observation. The fact that some people misunderstand or misapply them doesn't make the underlying principles wrong. You surveilled teenagers. You paid people to report on their relationships. You tried to isolate them from their support systems. Those aren't principles, that's abuse. It's systematic development. It's recognizing that to create greatness, you sometimes have to make difficult choices about relationships and priorities. Most athletes fail not because they lack talent, but because they get distracted by normal teenage concerns, dating, socializing, things that dilute their focus. Or maybe they fail because adults like you steal their childhood and turn them into products instead of people. There was a long silence. When Westbrook spoke again, his voice was cold. I've made you a generous offer, Mr. Jordan. If you proceed with this publication, you'll be opening yourself up to scrutiny as well. People will ask why you waited 45 years to come forward. They'll question your motives. They'll wonder if you're trying to rewrite history to stay relevant now that your playing days are over. Let them question. The truth matters more than my reputation. Does it? Because I have my own documentation from 1978, Mr. Jordan. I have notes about your behavior, your relationships, your family dynamics. If you attack me publicly, I'll release everything, and I don't think you'll like how some of it makes you look. A teenage boy so obsessed with basketball that he neglected other aspects of his development, so driven by rejection that he became almost pathologically competitive. Those notes were created through illegal surveillance. Unethical, perhaps, but not illegal. And they're mine to do with as I please. So think carefully before you proceed with this publication. You're attacking a man who has spent 50 years observing and documenting exceptional athletes. I know things about you, about your family, about that summer that you might prefer stayed private. Michael felt a chill but refused to show fear. If you had anything truly damaging, you would have used it decades ago. Your threats don't scare me, Westbrook, and they certainly won't stop me from protecting other kids from what you tried to do to me. Then you're a fool. You're about to destroy the mythology that built your legend. People love the story of Michael Jordan, who got cut and worked harder than everyone. They won't love the story of Michael Jordan, who needed his daddy and his brother to protect him from a sports consultant. Maybe not, but it's the truth. And I'm done living a lie just to make people comfortable. Fine. Westbrook's voice dripped with venom now. Publish your little article. Tell your sob story. But don't be surprised when it backfires. Don't be surprised when people question everything about your career. When they wonder what else you've lied about. When they start picking apart every aspect of your legacy, looking for other hidden truths. Goodbye, Mr. Westbrook. Michael hung up. His hands were shaking. He immediately called Rebecca Chen and told her about the conversation. He threatened you, Rebecca said. That's important. That shows he's desperate. It also confirms that our story is accurate. If it wasn't, he'd threaten to sue for defamation, not threaten to release embarrassing information. He said he has documentation from 1978. Notes about me and my family. Of course he does. But Michael, anything he releases will only prove our point. That he was surveilling you, documenting your life without permission, treating you like a research subject instead of a person. If he goes public with that material, it actually helps our case. Marcus Williams, the attorney, agreed when Michael called him next. Westbrook's threat is toothless. Any documentation he releases will be evidence of his unethical surveillance. It might be embarrassing for you personally, but it strengthens our argument that his methods were invasive and inappropriate. Still, the call left Michael unsettled. He drove to Wilmington to see Vanessa, needing her calming presence. She was in her hotel room, packing to return home to Virginia for a few days before the article published. When Michael told her about Westbrook's call, her face went pale. He knows about the article? How? He has sources, apparently. People who tell him things. Or maybe he's just been tracking Rebecca's investigation and put the pieces together. What did he threaten to release about you? I don't know. Notes from his surveillance, observations about my family, something about my behavior that summer. Honestly, I was 15 and heartbroken when you left. I'm sure I acted out in ways that could be portrayed negatively if someone wanted to spin it that way. Vanessa took his hands. Michael, you were a child. Whatever he documented, whatever he observed, you were a child being watched by an adult predator. If he releases anything, people will see it for what it is. Evidence of his obsession with controlling young athletes. I know you're right, but it still bothers me. The idea that he was watching me, documenting my private moments, analyzing my behavior like I was some kind of experiment. That's exactly why we're telling this story. So other kids don't experience what you experienced. So other teenagers don't have to wonder if someone is watching them, judging them, planning to manipulate them. They spent the evening together, finding comfort in each other's presence. Michael told her stories about his father and Larry, sharing memories of family dinners and basketball games, of the ordinary moments that had been shadowed by extraordinary secrets. Your father sounds like he was wonderful, Vanessa said. Flawed like everyone, but fundamentally good. I wish I'd gotten to know him better. He would have loved you. He would have appreciated that you saw me for who I was, not what I might become. That's all I ever wanted, to see you. The real you, not the mythology or the brand or the legacy. Just Michael. That's what I love about you, Michael said. 45 years later, you still see me. Not Michael Jordan the icon, but Michael the person. The next 2 days passed in a blur of final preparations. Rebecca sent Michael the final version of the article. Patricia compiled the last of her documentation. Coach Herring recorded a video statement, knowing he might not be strong enough for interviews once the story broke. Marcus ensured all legal protections were in place, and Vanessa prepared herself for the spotlight she'd avoided for 45 years. "Are you sure about this?" Michael asked her the night before publication. "Once this article comes out, people are going to want to interview you, know your story, ask about your father. You've been private your whole life, I'm sure. My father deserves to have his story told properly. He wasn't a villain or a coward. He was a hero who chose love over money, who protected us when it mattered most. I want the world to know that, even if it means giving up your privacy." "Privacy is overrated," Vanessa smiled. "Besides, I've spent 45 years being invisible. Maybe it's time to be seen." The article was scheduled to publish online at 6 a.m. Eastern Time. Michael couldn't sleep that night. He got up at 4 a.m. and made coffee, then sat at his computer waiting. Vanessa had driven back to Virginia but was on video call with him, both of them watching the clock. At 5:55 a.m., Rebecca sent a text. "Going live in 5 minutes. Thank you for trusting me with this. You're doing the right thing." At 6 a.m. exactly, Michael refreshed the Sports Illustrated website, and there it was. The headline filled the screen, above a photograph of young Michael shooting baskets at MP Park, one of Patricia's images from 1978. "The Making of a Legend: How Michael Jordan was almost controlled by a sports predator, and how his family saved him." An investigation by Rebecca Chen. Michael began reading, his heart pounding. Vanessa read along on her own computer, occasionally gasping or crying as the story unfolded in Rebecca's careful prose. The article was everything Michael had hoped for. It was fair, thorough, and devastating. It told his story but also the larger story. The pattern of manipulation, the other victims, the systemic problem of adults trying to control young athletes' lives. It honored his father and Larry, describing their sacrifices in detail. It praised Coach Herring for making an impossible choice. It portrayed Eugene Cole sympathetically as a man in desperate circumstances who ultimately chose integrity over money. And it ended with Michael's call to action, a demand for better protections for young athletes, for regulations preventing the kind of surveillance and manipulation Westbrook had practiced, for a cultural shift away from seeing talented children as products to be developed and towards seeing them as people to be protected. By 7 a.m., Michael's phone was exploding. Texts from friends, former teammates, coaches, celebrities. Calls from news organizations wanting interviews. His social media notifications were overwhelming. His children called, all of them emotional after reading the article. "Dad, this is incredible," Jasmine said. "You're changing the conversation about youth sports. This is going to help so many kids." Espen was already running the story, with commentators discussing the revelations. CNN called asking for an interview. The Today Show, Good Morning America, every major media outlet wanted to talk to him. And through it all, Michael kept checking on Vanessa, making sure she was okay as her own phone exploded with interview requests. "I'm good," she assured him. "Nervous but good. My father's story is being told properly. That's what matters." At 9 a.m., Patricia called. "Michael, it's working. I've already heard from 3 different youth sports organizations who want to implement new policies based on the issues raised in the article. And I've gotten emails from parents thanking us for exposing Westbrook's methods." At 10 a.m., Marcus called with news. "Westbrook's attorney contacted me. They're threatening to sue for defamation, but it's toothless. Everything in the article is documented. They're just trying to scare us." "Let them try," Michael said. "We have the truth on our side." At noon, Coach Herring called, his voice weak but satisfied. "We did it, Michael. We told the truth. Whatever happens now, we told the truth. Thank you, Coach, for everything. For protecting me 45 years ago, and for having the courage to reveal it now. Thank you for understanding. For forgiving me for cutting you. There was nothing to forgive. You saved me." By evening, the article had been read millions of times. It was trending on every social media platform. Athletes from every sport were sharing it, adding their own stories of being controlled or manipulated by overzealous adults. Parents were posting about the pressure they felt to manage every aspect of their children's athletic development. The conversation Michael had hoped to start was happening. But so was the backlash. Some commentators questioned why he'd waited 45 years to come forward. Others suggested he was trying to rewrite history or make excuses for any perceived failures in his career. A few even defended Westbrook's methods, arguing that systematic development was necessary to create elite athletes. Michael expected this. He'd been warned that not everyone would understand or accept his story. But the criticism still stung. That evening, as media requests continued flooding in, Michael received one more unexpected call, this time from a number he recognized. "Michael, it's Adam Silver." The NBA commissioner's voice was warm. "I just finished reading the article. I want you to know that the league stands with you. What you've revealed about Westbrook and these manipulative practices, it's important work. We're going to use this as a catalyst for implementing stronger protections for young players." "Thank you, Adam. That means a lot. I also want you to know that this doesn't change how we see your legacy. If anything, it enhances it. You didn't just overcome opponents on the court. You overcame people trying to control and manipulate your entire life. That's even more impressive than 6 championships." After they hung up, Michael sat alone in his study, looking at the trophies and awards that lined the walls. His whole life, he'd thought these objects represented his greatest achievements. The proof that he'd overcome being cut from that team, that he'd proved everyone wrong. Now he understood that his greatest achievement was simpler and more profound. He'd been loved well, by a father who'd spent 15 years making up for one mistake, by a brother who'd sacrificed their closeness to protect him, by a coach who'd damaged his own reputation to save him from manipulation, by a woman who'd carried love for him across 45 years. That love, complicated, sacrificial, hidden love, had made everything else possible. His phone rang again. It was Vanessa. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I'm good. Overwhelmed, but good. How about you?" "Same. I've done 3 interviews already, and I have 4 more scheduled for tomorrow. Everyone wants to know about my father, about our summer together, about why I never reached out before." "What are you telling them?" "The truth. That my father was a hero. That you were the boy I loved who became the man I still love. That some stories take 45 years to tell properly, but they're worth the wait." Michael smiled, feeling something settle in his chest. "I love you, Vanessa. I should have said it sooner. I should have said it the day you sent that letter. But I'm saying it now. I love you." "I love you too, Michael. I always have." They talked for another hour, processing the day, discussing the interviews and reactions, and what came next. Eventually, they said goodnight, both exhausted but satisfied. Michael turned off his phone and sat in the quiet of his study, thinking about his father and Larry, about Coach Herring who was dying, about Patricia who'd documented everything, about Eugene Cole who'd chosen love over money. And he thought about Vanessa, his first love, his found-again love, the woman who'd waited 45 years for their story to be told properly. Tomorrow would bring more interviews, more reactions, more conversations about youth sports and protection, and the price of greatness. But tonight, Michael Jordan allowed himself to simply feel grateful. Grateful for the love that had saved him. Grateful for the truth finally revealed. Grateful for the second chance he never thought he'd have. And grateful that after 45 years of living with an incomplete story, he finally understood the full truth about who he was and how he'd become that person. Not through manipulation or control, but through love, sacrifice, and the fierce protection of people who'd believed he deserved to become great on his own terms. That was the truth. And finally, after 45 years, the world knew it too. We hope this story touched your heart and reminded you of the power of true love and sacrifice. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching this video from? Drop your country or city in the comments below. We love connecting with viewers from all around the world. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. By subscribing, you're helping us spread kindness and inspiring stories to more people who need to hear them. And don't go just yet. Click on the video appearing on your screen right now for another incredible story that will warm your heart. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.